Chapter 1. The knock on the iron door. The wind off Lake Michigan didn't just blow, it bit. It had teeth, sharp and icy, gnawing through the thin wool of Clara Vance's coat as she hurried down the slick cobblestones of Chicago's Lower West Side. It was November 1924, and the city was a sprawling beast of shadow and electric light, groaning under the weight of its own secrets. Clara clutched her collar tight against her throat, her knuckles white, her breath pluming in short, nervous bursts before her face. She kept her head down, the brim of her felt cloche hat pulled low to shield her eyes from the stinging rain. To anyone watching from the tenement windows above, she was just another silhouette in the gray tapestry of the night, a nobody moving toward nowhere. But Clara wasn't going nowhere. She was heading toward the heartbeat of the forbidden city. She turned the corner onto a narrow alleyway that smelled of wet ash, rotting cabbage, and the faint metallic tang of the nearby slaughterhouses. It was an uninviting throat of darkness, flanked by the brick backsides of respectable warehouses. Puddles reflected the fractured yellow light of a lone street lamp flickering at the far end. Halfway down the alley, the shadows seemed to thicken. There was no sign, no marquee, no welcoming doorman in a gold-braided uniform. There was only a heavy industrial steel door, rusted at the hinges and painted a dull, peeling black. It looked like the entrance to a boiler room or a loading dock for unwanted freight. Clara stopped in front of it. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that rivaled the drum solos she'd heard drifting out of basement windows in Bronzeville. She checked the street behind her. Empty. The only sound was the distant wail of a police siren, a sound as common in Chicago as the wind. She took a deep breath, tasting the grime of the city, and raised a gloved hand. Knock, 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 knock. The rhythm was specific. 2 sharp raps, a pause, 2 quick ones, another pause, and a final heavy thud. She waited. For a long moment there was only the sound of the rain hissing against the bricks. A seed of panic began to sprout in her chest. Had the code changed? Had the feds raided the place last night? In this line of work, if you could call the desperate hustle of the Prohibition-era work, stability was a ghost. Places like this, the Blind Tigers and gin joints, appeared and vanished like smoke rings. Then, with a sound like grinding bones, a small rectangular slat in the iron door slid open. A pair of eyes appeared in the darkness of the slot. They were hard, watery eyes framed by wrinkles that looked like they had been carved with a knife. The smell of stale cigar smoke wafted out, instantly overpowering the scent of the rain. "Shop's closed, doll," a voice rasped. It sounded like gravel tumbling in a cement mixer. "Go peddle your papers somewhere else." Clara didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. She stepped closer to the iron door, the rain dripping from her hat onto her nose. "I'm not selling papers, Sal." The eyes narrowed. "You know my name? That don't make you special. Half the rats in this city know my name." "I'm here for the arrangement," Clara said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her knees. She recited the phrase she had practiced in front of her cracked mirror for 3 hours. "The florist sent me. He said the lilies are wilting in the heat." Silence hung heavy in the alleyway. Sal's eyes shifted left, then right, scanning the darkness behind her for the glint of a badge or the silhouette of a copper. "Who sent you, really?" Sal asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Jimmy Two-Tone," Clara lied smoothly. She didn't know a Jimmy Two-Tone, but she knew the name carried weight in this district. She'd heard it whispered in the back of the diner where she washed dishes until yesterday. It was a gamble, a dangerous one. If Jimmy was dead, or if Jimmy was on the outs with this crew, she was as good as dead in this alley. The eyes in the slot assessed her for another agonizing 10 seconds. Clara held his gaze, channeling every ounce of false bravado she possessed. She thought of the empty icebox in her apartment. She thought of the rent collector who had threatened to put her things on the street by Friday. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Desperation was her fuel. "Jimmy, huh?" Sal grunted. "Lucky for you, he's got credit here." The slot slammed shut. The sound of heavy bolts being drawn back echoed. Thunk, thunk, clank. The heavy iron door groaned inward, opening just enough for a slender body to slip through. Clara didn't hesitate. She stepped over the threshold, leaving the cold, wet reality of 1924 Chicago behind. The transition was instant and physical. One moment she was shivering in a freezing alley, the next she was enveloped in a wall of heat, noise, and haze. The door slammed shut behind her, sealing out the world. She stood at the top of a steep wooden staircase leading down into the earth. The air here was thick, almost chewable. It smelled of expensive perfume, sweat, roasting coffee, and the sharp medicinal sting of bootleg gin. But it was the sound that hit her hardest. Jazz. It surged up the stairs like a physical force. A trumpet screamed a high note that vibrated in her teeth, followed by the chaotic, joyful tumble of a piano and the deep, rhythmic thumping of a double bass. It was loud, raucous, and alive. Clara descended the stairs, her hand trailing along the velvet rope banister. As she reached the bottom, the room opened up, and even she, who had seen her share of speakeasies, had to pause. They called it the Gilded Lily, and tonight it lived up to its name. The basement had been transformed into a palace of gold and shadow. Low ceilings were draped in amber silk to hide the water pipes. Ornate chandeliers, likely stolen from some uptown mansion, cast a warm, forgiving glow over the crowd. The tables were packed, men in tuxedos with slicked-back hair laughing too loud, women in flapper dresses that sparkled with sequins, their bobs sharp and their lips painted a dark, rebellious red. Smoke hung in the air like blue strata, swirling around the dancers who moved frantically to the Charleston on the small parquet floor. It was a kaleidoscope of movement, fringe spinning, pearls swinging, arms and legs kicking in a defiant rejection of the laws of the land. Clara navigated through the crowd, clutching her purse tight. She wasn't here to dance. She wasn't here to drink. She was here to survive. She scanned the room, looking for the man she had been told about. "Look for the red carnation," the tipster had said. "He sits near the kitchen doors, so he can run if the bulls show up." She wove between the tables, apologizing as she brushed past a woman laughing hysterically at a man's joke. A long cigarette holder perched precariously between her fingers. A waiter rushed past Clara with a tray held high, laden with teacups that clearly contained nothing brewed from leaves. Finally, she spotted him. Sitting at a corner booth, shrouded in shadow, was a man who looked like he owned the very air everyone else was breathing. He was broad-shouldered, wearing a pinstripe suit that cost more than Clara would make in 5 years. A red carnation was pinned to his lapel, looking like a drop of fresh blood against the dark fabric. This was Mr. O'Malley, the king of the Lower West Side. Clara took a breath to steady her nerves, smoothed the front of her damp coat, suddenly conscious of how shabby she looked amidst this glitter, and approached the table. 2 men stood on either side of the booth. They looked like twins carved from granite, their arms crossed, their eyes tracking her approach like turret guns. "That's close enough, sister," one of them growled as she got within 5 feet. Mr. O'Malley didn't look up. He was busy lighting a cigar, the flame illuminating a face that was handsome but tired, with dark circles under eyes that had seen too much. "I need to speak to the boss," Clara said, her voice louder than she intended, trying to be heard over the wail of the saxophone. "Boss is busy," the guard said, stepping forward to block her path. "Go find a dance partner." "I'm not here to dance," Clara said, stepping around him with a fluidity that surprised even her. She looked directly at O'Malley. "I'm here to sing." O'Malley paused, He blew a plume of thick white smoke toward the ceiling and finally looked at her. His eyes were a startling shade of green, cold and calculating. He looked her up and down, taking in the wet coat, the cheap shoes, the defiance in her jaw. "To sing," O'Malley repeated. His voice was smooth, like whiskey over ice, but with a dangerous edge. "We got a singer. Tootsie over there." He gestured vaguely toward the stage. The band was playing an instrumental, but a woman in a red dress was sitting on a stool near the piano, fanning herself and looking bored. "Tootsie has a cold?" Clara bluffed. "I heard it in her voice last week. She's flat on the high notes. You need insurance." O'Malley chuckled, a low rumble. "You got moxie, kid, I'll give you that. Breaking into my joint, marching up to my table, and insulting my talent. You know I could have my boys here, throw you out the back door. And the back door don't have stairs. It's just a drop." "You could," Clara said, her heart hammering so hard she thought he could see it through her coat. "But then you'd be missing out on the best voice in Chicago." The table went quiet. Even the guards looked at her with a mix of annoyance and amusement. O'Malley stared at her for a long moment. He took a drag of his cigar, tapping the ash into a crystal tray. "The best voice in Chicago, huh? That's a tall order. We got Caruso on the phonograph in the back." "Phonographs don't sell gin, Mr. O'Malley," Clara said. "Emotion does. You want people to stay? You want them to cry in their beer and order another round to forget? You need me." It was the truest thing she had said all night. She knew how this world worked. People didn't come to speakeasies just to break the law. They came to feel something other than the crushing gray weight of post-war reality. O'Malley stared at her, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. He snapped his fingers. The music seemed to drop in volume as if the room obeyed his command. "All right," he said, waving a hand toward the stage. "Doc, give the girl a mic." The piano player, a withered old man with thick glasses known as Doc, looked up, confused. "You got one song, sweetheart," O'Malley said, leaning back in the booth. "If you're good, you get a meal and $10. If you stink, well, let's just say you better know how to land on your feet." Clara nodded, her throat tight. She turned and walked toward the small, raised platform that served as the stage. Every eye in the room felt like a physical weight on her back. She could feel the judgment, the skepticism. Who is this drowned rat? What is she doing here? She shed her wet coat, draping it over a chair. Underneath, she wore a simple, sleeveless dress of pale blue silk. It was old, mended in 3 places, but in the dim light, it looked like water. She stepped up to the microphone, a heavy chrome instrument on a stand. She gripped the metal. It was cold against her sweating palms. Doc looked at her from behind the piano. "What's it gonna be, doll?" he muttered, his fingers hovering over the keys. "Make it snappy. My whiskey is getting warm." Clara closed her eyes for a second. She thought about the wind outside. She thought about the letter on her kitchen table, the one from the sanatorium where her sister was coughing her lungs out. The bill she couldn't pay. She channeled that cold, that fear, that desperate longing into her chest. "Am I blue?" she whispered. "Key of C." Doc raised an eyebrow, but nodded. He played the intro, a slow, mournful rolling of chords that cut through the chatter of the room. The crowd didn't quiet down immediately. They were still laughing, clinking glasses, shouting orders. Then, Clara opened her mouth. "I'm just a woman, a lonely woman, waiting on the weary shore." Her voice wasn't just loud, it was textured. It had grit in it, like the silt at the bottom of the Mississippi. It started low, a smoky contralto that vibrated in the chest, then climbed, effortless and clear, into a sorrowful soprano. The conversation at the nearest table died, then the next table, then the one after that. Like a wave of silence spreading from the stage, the room went quiet. The only sounds were the clinking of ice in a glass and the mournful wail of Clara's voice. She didn't sing it like a performance. She sang it like a confession. She poured every ounce of her frustration, her hunger and her fear into the lyrics. She kept her eyes open, scanning the room as she sang. She saw the flappers stop dancing, their makeup suddenly looking like masks. She saw the tough guys at the bar lower their drinks, looking into the amber liquid as if searching for lost memories. And she saw O'Malley. He hadn't moved. The cigar had burned down to his knuckles, but he didn't seem to notice. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But as her gaze drifted during the bridge of the song, something else caught her eye. In the far back of the room, behind a decorative screen that separated the VIPs from the rabble, a door had opened. It wasn't the main entrance. It was a service door hidden in the paneling. Two men stepped out. One was a police officer in full uniform, a sight that should have caused a panic, but didn't. The other was a man in a beige trench coat, his hat pulled low. Clara shouldn't have been looking. She should have been focused on the song. But her survival instinct was sharper than her artistic one. She watched as the police officer handed a thick brown envelope to the man in the trench coat. The man in the coat opened it, thumbed through a stack of cash, and nodded. Then, the man in the coat looked up. Across the smoky room, over the heads of 100 people, his eyes locked with Clara's. He had a face she would never forget. Pale, sharp-featured, with a thin white scar running from his left ear down to his jawline. It gave him a perpetual, gruesome grin. He saw her watching. He saw that she saw the envelope. Clara's heart skipped a beat, faltering the rhythm of the song for a microsecond. She recovered instantly, sliding into the final prolonged note of the chorus. But the damage was done. The man in the trench coat tapped the police officer on the shoulder and pointed at the stage. Pointed at her. Panic flared in her gut, hot and acidic. She had just witnessed a payoff. A dirty cop and who? A Fed? A rival mobster? She finished the song, holding the final note until her lungs burned, letting it fade into a whisper. For 3 seconds there was absolute silence in the Gilded Lily. Then, the room exploded. Applause roared like thunder. Men whistled, women clapped their jeweled hands. Even Doc at the piano nodded appreciatively, muttering, "Not bad, kid. Not bad." Clara forced a smile, bowing slightly. Her legs felt like jelly. She wasn't trembling from the performance anymore. She was trembling because the man with the scar was pushing his way through the crowd, moving toward the stage. She stepped down, grabbing her wet coat. She needed to get to O'Malley. He was the only power in the room that could shield her. "Hey, Canary!" It was the floor manager, Slick Eddie, a weasel of a man with oil-slicked hair. He grabbed her arm as she tried to pass. "Boss wants to see you, now." "I know," Clara said, breathless, trying to pull away. "I'm going. Not that way," Eddie said, steering her away from O'Malley's booth. "Back office. He said to bring you back there, if you were any good." But Clara looked back. The man with the scar was halfway across the floor, blocked momentarily by a waiter who had dropped a tray of glasses. The crash of breaking glass added to the chaos. "Move it," Eddie said, shoving her toward a dark corridor behind the bar. Clara had no choice. She was swept into the narrow hallway, the noise of the party muffling instantly as the heavy velvet curtains swung shut behind them. The hallway was dimly lit, smelling of stale beer and sawdust. "Wait here," Eddie grunted, pointing to a wooden chair outside a heavy oak door. "Don't move." He disappeared into the office, leaving Clara alone in the semi-darkness. She sat on the edge of the chair, her coat bundled in her lap. Her pulse was a drum in her ears. "Run!" a voice in her head screamed. "Get out the back. Climb a window. Just go." But she couldn't. She needed the money. She needed the protection. And if she ran now, after what she had seen, they would hunt her down. In Chicago, you didn't run from what you knew. You leveraged it. The door to the office opened. It wasn't Eddie. It was O'Malley. He filled the doorway, his presence imposing in the narrow hall. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked serious, businesslike. "You got a set of pipes, miss?" "Vance," she said, standing up. "Clara Vance." "Vance." He tested the name. "Well, Clara Vance, you're hired. Tootsie is out. You start tonight. 20 a week, plus tips. And you drink on the house, within reason." Relief washed over her, so strong it almost made her dizzy. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. You won't regret it." "I rarely do," he said. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But listen to me closely, Clara. This ain't a church choir. You see things here. You hear things, and if you're smart, you forget them just as fast." Clara froze. Did he know? Had he seen her watching the payoff? "I have a bad memory," she whispered. "Terrible." O'Malley studied her face. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of damp hair from her forehead. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but his eyes were hard as flint. "Good," he said. "Keep it that way. 'Cause in this town a long memory leads to a short life." He stepped back. "Go get changed. Eddie will show you the dressing room. You're on again in 20 minutes. He turned and walked back into his office, closing the door with a solid click. Clara let out a breath she felt she had been holding since she entered the alley. She had done it. She was in. She had a job, she had money, she had a place to hide from the cold. She turned to find Eddie, but stopped. At the far end of the hallway, near the curtain that led back to the main room, the velvet draped moved. The man with the scar stepped through. He wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. He was looking directly at her. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just stood there, the dim light catching the white ridge of scar tissue on his jaw, his hands deep in the pockets of his trench coat. He raised one hand, pointed a finger at her like a pistol, and mimed pulling the trigger. Then he turned and vanished back into the noise and smoke of the gilded lily. Clara stood alone in the hallway, the distant sound of jazz filtering through the walls. The St. Louis blues played in her head, but the lyrics had changed. She wasn't waiting on the weary shore anymore. She had dived into the deep end and the water was full of sharks. She gripped her coat tighter, straightened her spine, and walked toward the dressing room. She was Clara Vance, the girl with the voice that stopped the room. And she was going to survive this night, even if she had to sing for her life. Chapter 2. Rhythms and Rumors. The dressing room smelled of lavender powder, unwashed costumes, and the distinct, acrid scent of nervous sweat. It was a cramped space tucked behind the main stage, the walls plastered with peeling wallpaper and photographs of movie stars, Valentino, Pickford, Fairbanks, cut from magazines and pinned up like religious icons. Clara Vance sat at a vanity table that was little more than a plank of wood over 2 barrels, staring at her reflection in a mirror surrounded by naked, blinding light bulbs. Her hands were still shaking, just a little. "You got the jitters, honey? Or is that just the rhythm sticking to your bones?" Clara looked up. Leaning against the doorframe was a girl who looked like she had been born inside a champagne bottle. She was impossibly thin, with a bob of jet-black hair, so sharp it could cut glass. She wore a flapper dress, made entirely of silver fringe, that shimmered with her slightest breath. "I'm fine," Clara said, lying through her teeth. She rubbed her arms, trying to scrub away the phantom sensation of the scarred man's finger pointing at her. The girl pushed off the doorframe and sauntered over, popping a stick of gum into her mouth. "I'm Ruby, head hoof shaker. Welcome to the zoo." "Clara." "I know. Heard you out there," Ruby said, leaning in to inspect her makeup in Clara's mirror. You got a voice like a bruised peach, Clara. Sweet but dark in the middle. The boss likes that. He's a moody son of a bitch. Mr. O'Malley, Clara asked, feigning casual interest. He seems powerful, Ruby snorted, a decidedly unladylike sound. O'Malley is the king of the West Side, sugar. But heavy lies the crown, right? Everyone wants what he's got. The North Side gangs, the feds, even the guys who sell him his own booze. She lowered her voice, her eyes darting to the closed door. Word is the wolves are circling. Business has been complicated lately. Clara's stomach tightened. Complicated. That was one word for payoffs involving dirty cops and scar-faced men in trench coats. What kind of complicated? Clara asked. Ruby shrugged, adjusting a strap on her shoulder. Shipments going missing, trucks getting hijacked, rats in the walls. The usual. Just keep your nose clean, Canary. Sing your songs, take your tips, and don't look at anything you aren't supposed to, especially in the back rooms. Ruby winked, spun on her heel, and kicked the door open. Showtime, girls! Let's go shake it till the pearls fall off. A gaggle of other dancers flooded past the door, a whirlwind of feathers and giggles, leaving Clara alone in the sudden silence. Don't look at anything you aren't supposed to. The advice was sound, but it was about an hour too late. Clara fixed her lipstick, a darker shade of crimson she'd borrowed from the vanity, and stood up. She wasn't just a singer anymore. She was a witness. And in Chicago, witnesses either disappeared or they made themselves indispensable. She needed to know what she had walked into. The second set was different. The crowd had changed. The early evening drinkers, the nervous office clerks, and thrill-seeking couples were gone. In their place were the hard hitters. The air was thicker, the smoke heavier, the laughter louder and more aggressive. The band, now fully warmed up, was tearing through a fast-tempo rendition of Tiger Rag. The music was a physical assault, the trumpet screaming, the trombone sliding and growling, the drums creating a chaotic, driving heartbeat that seemed to synchronize with the pulse of the room. Clara stood by the side of the stage, waiting for her cue. From here, she could see the entire ecosystem of the Gilded Lily. It was a study in excess. Waiters moved like acrobats, balancing trays of coffee mugs filled with amber liquid. At the tables, fortunes were being spent. She saw a man light a cigar with a $20 bill. She saw a woman laugh and throw her head back, a diamond necklace catching the light, while her hand rested on the knee of a man who looked like he killed people for a living. And there was O'Malley. He was still at his booth, but he wasn't alone anymore. He was surrounded by associates, men with thick necks and expensive suits. They were leaning in, talking low. O'Malley looked tense. His jaw was set, his eyes scanning the room not with enjoyment but with the hypervigilance of a predator, expecting a challenge. Clara stepped up to the microphone. The lights dimmed, focusing on her. "Let's slow it down," she murmured into the mic. The band shifted gears instantly, sliding into a sultry, slow-drag blues. As she sang, Clara let her eyes roam. She wasn't just performing, she was hunting. She looked for the scarred man. He wasn't in the main room. She looked for the dirty cop. Gone. But she noticed something else. Eddie, the weasel-faced floor manager, was moving through the room with a strange, nervous energy. He wasn't checking on customers. He wasn't managing the waiters. He was weaving through the tables, his eyes darting toward the back exit, the service door, near the kitchen. Every time O'Malley looked in Eddie's direction, Eddie would busy himself wiping a table or scolding a busboy. But the moment O'Malley's attention shifted, Eddie was moving again. He's up to something, Clara thought, her voice holding a long, mournful note. She finished her set to raucous applause. Sweat trickled down her back. The heat in the basement was stifling. As she stepped off the stage, Doc, the piano player, nodded at her. "You're melting, kid," he said, not unkindly. Go get some air, or some water. Kitchen's through the double doors on the left. Tell Cookie I sent you. Thanks, Doc. Clara grabbed her purse and headed for the kitchen doors. She told herself she just wanted water. She told herself she was just hot. But her feet moved with a purpose that had nothing to do with thirst. She pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen. It was a chaotic inferno of steam and shouting. Cooks in stained aprons were chopping, frying, and plating food at breakneck speed. Dishwashers were submerged in clouds of steam. No one paid attention to the girl in the blue dress slipping past the prep stations. Clara saw a heavy metal door at the back of the kitchen, slightly ajar. Cool air was drafting through it. It led to the storage rooms and the loading dock, the guts of the operation. She glanced around. The cooks were arguing about a burned steak. No one was watching. Clara slipped through the metal door. The noise of the kitchen died away instantly, replaced by the hum of the refrigeration units and the drip of condensation. She was in a long concrete corridor, lined with crates, apples, flour, tea. The labels were innocent, but Clara knew that if she pried open the crates labeled canned peaches, she'd likely find bottles of Canadian whiskey, nestled in straw. She walked softly, her heels clicking faintly on the concrete. She needed to find a tap, get some water, and get back. But then she heard voices. They were coming from around the corner, near the wine cellar. Too risky, I'm telling you. He's got eyes everywhere. The voice was high-pitched, whiny. It was Eddie. Clara froze. She pressed herself against a stack of crates, her heart hammering against her ribs. A second voice answered. It was deep, smooth, and chillingly familiar. He has eyes, Eddie, but he's blind. He thinks he's untouchable. That's why he'll fall. Clara didn't need to see the face to know who it was. The scarred man. She held her breath, terrified that the sound of her own pulse would give her away. She inched forward, peering through a gap between two boxes of cigars. They were standing in the shadows of the wine cellar. Eddie was sweating, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. The scarred man was calm, leaning against a rack of vintage Bordeaux, examining his fingernails. Thursday, the scarred man said. The shipment from the Great Lakes comes in at midnight. The big one. The trucks will be at the Navy Pier warehouse. Yeah, I know the schedule, Eddie hissed. O'Malley is going personally to oversee it. He doesn't trust the drivers anymore. Exactly, the scarred man smiled, and, even in the shadows, the expression looked like a wound opening. He'll be there, and so will we, but not to collect the booze, Eddie. To collect the king. Clara clamped a hand over her mouth. They were planning a hit, not just a robbery, an execution. They were going to kill O'Malley and take the shipment. And me? Eddie asked, his voice trembling. What about me? If O'Malley figures out I tipped you off, O'Malley won't figure out anything. He'll be dead, the scarred man said coldly. And you, Eddie, will be the new manager of the Gilded Lily. Under new ownership, of course. The North Side sends its regards. The money, Eddie said greedily. Half the take. That was the deal. You'll get your clams, Eddie. Just make sure the back door is unlocked tonight. I need to bring a few friends in to case the joint before Thursday. We need to know the layout of the office. Tonight, Eddie squeaked. It's packed out there. The crowd is good cover. Just unlock the door at 2:00 a.m. We'll do the rest. The scarred man pushed off the wine rack. Now, go back out there and smile. Pour the drinks. Be a good little soldier. Clara pulled back, her mind racing. 2:00 a.m. That was in 3 hours. They were going to infiltrate the club tonight to plan the murder for Thursday. She heard Eddie's footsteps approaching. Panic surged. There was nowhere to hide. The corridor was too long to run back to the kitchen without being seen. She looked around frantically. To her right was a small service closet. She grabbed the handle. Locked. Damn it. Eddie was rounding the corner in 3 seconds. Clara did the only thing she could think of. She dropped her purse. It hit the concrete floor with a heavy thud, spilling lipstick, a compact mirror, and a few coins. Clara immediately crouched down, frantically gathering her things, just as Eddie appeared around the stack of crates. Eddie stopped dead. He jumped as if he'd been electrocuted. "What the? Who's there?" Clara looked up, wide-eyed, feigning surprise. She held up her compact mirror. "Oh, Eddie, you scared the life out of me." Eddie stared at her, his face draining of color. He looked back toward the wine cellar, then down at Clara. "What are you doing here?" His voice was a strangled whisper. I was looking for water," Clara stammered, standing up and brushing off her dress. "Doc said to ask Cookie, but the kitchen was so busy, and I got turned around, and then I dropped my bag." She let her voice trail off into a ditzy, helpless giggle. "I'm hopeless with directions. Is this the bathroom?" Eddie narrowed his eyes. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of fear and cheap cologne. "How long have you been here?" "Just now," Clara said, keeping her eyes wide and innocent. "I just walked in." "Why, is this a restricted area?" "I'm so sorry, Eddie. I didn't mean to snoop." Eddie studied her face. He was looking for a lie. Clara summoned every ounce of acting ability she possessed. She thought of the rent money. She thought of her sister. She made herself small, confused, and harmless. From the darkness of the wine cellar, the scarred man did not emerge. He was waiting, listening. "Get out!" Eddie hissed, grabbing her arm roughly. "This ain't a powder room. Customers and staff stay out of the back unless they're carrying a crate. You got that?" Yes, of course," Clara said, wincing at his grip. "I'm sorry, Eddie." He shoved her toward the kitchen. "Go. Get back on stage, and if I catch you wandering again, you're out on the street. Capiche?" "Capiche," Clara whispered. She hurried back down the corridor, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She didn't look back. She burst into the kitchen, the heat and noise washing over her like a sanctuary. She grabbed a glass of water from a stunned dishwasher, downed it in one gulp, and pushed through the doors back into the club. The noise of the jazz hit her instantly. Laughter, music, life, but now it all sounded like a funeral dirge. She leaned against a pillar, trying to catch her breath. She looked across the room at O'Malley's booth. He was laughing at something one of his men said, a cigar clamped between his teeth. He looked powerful, invincible. He had no idea that the man pouring his drinks, Eddie, was selling him out for a pile of cash. He had no idea that he had until Thursday to live. Clara looked at the clock on the wall. 11:15 p.m. The scarred man's friends were coming at 2 o'clock a.m. She had a secret that could get her killed, or a secret that could make her valuable. She looked at O'Malley, and then she looked at the heavy iron front door, where Sal stood guard. She could leave. She could walk out right now, grab her coat, and never come back. She could go back to washing dishes and hiding from the landlord. She would be safe. Poor but safe. But then she remembered the look in the scarred man's eyes, the way he had pointed at her. He knew her face. If he took over the club, if he took over the West Side, there would be nowhere to hide. She was already in the game. The only way out was through. Clara straightened her dress. She fixed her hair. She took a deep breath. Inhaling the smoke and the danger, she began to walk through the crowded tables, not toward the exit, and not toward the stage. She walked straight toward O'Malley's booth. The 2 granite-faced guards stepped forward to block her path, but Clara didn't stop. She looked directly at O'Malley. "Mr. O'Malley," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. O'Malley looked up, surprised to see the new singer standing there with such intensity. He waved his guards back. "Miss Vance," he said, a hint of amusement in his eyes, "coming to ask for a raise already?" No, Clara said. She leaned in, placing her hands on the table. She felt the cold gaze of the scarred man burning in her memory. She lowered her voice so only O'Malley could hear. I'm here to tell you that your florist is selling you dead flowers. O'Malley's smile vanished. His eyes sharpened. What kind of riddle is that? It's not a riddle, Clara whispered. It's about Thursday, and it's about the man who holds the keys to your back door. O'Malley stared at her. The noise of the club seemed to fade away between them. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the resolve. He realized, in that moment, that the girl in the blue dress was not just a singer. Sit down, O'Malley said quietly, sliding over in the booth. Clara sat, and the rhythm of the night changed forever. Chapter 3. The Bootlegger's Bargain. The leather of the booth was cool against Clara's back, a stark contrast to the heat radiating from the man sitting 6 inches away. Up close, Declan O'Malley smelled of expensive bay rum shaving soap, Havanas, and the metallic tang of gunpowder, a scent that no amount of cologne could fully mask. He didn't look at her immediately. He took a slow drag from his cigar, the ember glowing like a dying star, and exhaled a thick plume of smoke that drifted between them like a curtain. You have 30 seconds, O'Malley said. His voice was low, barely audible over the thump of the bass drum on stage, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking a judge's bench. Convince me you're not wasting my time, or worse, that you're not a plant sent here to rattle my cage. Clara gripped her hands together in her lap to stop them from trembling. She knew that under the table, O'Malley's hand was likely resting near the holster she had glimpsed earlier. Eddie is going to open the back door at 2:00 a.m., Clara said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Tonight, he's letting men in to case the office. They want the layout. O'Malley's expression didn't change. He flicked an ash onto the floor. Eddie, my floor manager? The man who's been skimming off the top of the cover charge for 6 months thinking I don't notice. That Eddie? He's not just skimming anymore, Clara pressed. He sold you out. I heard him in the wine cellar. He was talking to a man with a scar running down his jaw. A white scar. For the first time, O'Malley stiffened. The movement was subtle, a tightening of the muscles in his jaw, a momentary stillness in his hands. He turned his head slowly to look at her, his green eyes boring into hers. Describe him, O'Malley commanded. Tall, pale. He wore a beige trench coat. He has a voice like grinding glass. He told Eddie the hit is set for Thursday, at the Navy Pier warehouse, during the midnight shipment. O'Malley went silent. The air around the booth seemed to drop 20 degrees. The jovial noise of the gilded lily, the clinking glasses, the laughter, the frantic jazz, felt suddenly distant, as if they were sitting in the eye of a hurricane. Vinnie the Scalpel Moretti, O'Malley whispered the name like a curse. North Side, O'Banion's favorite butcher. He looked at Clara with a new appraisal. The amusement was gone. In its place was a cold, calculating assessment. If Vinnie was in my cellar, he didn't come alone. And he doesn't leave loose ends. How are you still breathing? I hid, Clara lied, though it was close enough to the truth. And I played dumb when Eddie caught me. I don't think they know I heard the part about Thursday. But the scarred man, he saw me on stage. He pointed at me. O'Malley nodded slowly. He signaled to one of the granite-faced guards standing nearby. The man leaned down. Get the boys ready, O'Malley murmured. Quietly, no guns out yet. I don't want to panic the customers. And tell Tommy to bring the car around back, but keep the engine off. The guard nodded and melted into the crowd. O'Malley turned back to Clara. You said you wanted to talk about the florist. That was code. You're smart, Miss Vance. Maybe too smart for a canary. I need money, Clara said, her voice hardening. This was the moment. The pivot point between being a victim and being a player. And I need protection. If that man, Vinny, takes over, I'm dead. He knows I saw the payoff. The payoff? Earlier, during my first song, a cop handed him an envelope. Vinny pointed me out then, too. O'Malley let out a short, bitter laugh. Captain Miller, I wondered why he'd been scarce lately. So, the North Side is buying my cops and my staff. He leaned in closer, his face inches from hers. What's your price, Clara? $500, Clara blurted out. It was a fortune. Enough to pay off the sanatorium for 6 months. Enough to pay her back rent. Enough to buy a train ticket to anywhere if this went south. O'Malley raised an eyebrow. 500 clams. You think a piece of information is worth $500? I think your life is worth more, Clara countered. And I think knowing that your own manager is opening the gates for the Wolves Inn. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 2 hours and 40 minutes is worth every penny. O'Malley studied her. He took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving her face. He was looking for the tell, the twitch of a liar, the sweat of a traitor. But all he saw was desperate, terrified honesty. Deal, O'Malley said. But there's a catch. What catch? You don't get the money yet. You get it when I see the whites of their eyes. If that door opens at 2:00 a.m. and Vinny's goons walk in, you get your 500. If the door stays shut. Well, let's just say you'll wish you'd stayed in the kitchen. Clara swallowed hard. And until then? Until then, you're my date, O'Malley said, sliding his arm along the back of the booth behind her shoulders. It looked possessive, casual to an onlooker, but Clara felt the weight of it, like a shackle. Smile, Clara. You're sitting with the king. Try to look like you're enjoying it. The next 2 hours were an agonizing blur of tension masquerading as a party. Clara sat by O'Malley's side, sipping a gin Ricky that tasted like turpentine and juniper. She watched the room. She watched Eddie. The little manager was a nervous wreck. To anyone else, he looked busy, directing waiters, laughing too loudly at customers' jokes, wiping down the bar. But Clara saw the way his eyes kept flicking to the clock. She saw the way his hands shook when he lit a cigarette. O'Malley, by contrast, was ice. He greeted well-wishers, bought rounds of drinks for the house, and acted every inch the benevolent monarch of the underworld. But every muscle in his body was coiled. Under the table, his hand never strayed far from his waistband. At 1:30 a.m., the band played their final number, a raucous, brass-heavy rendition of When the Saints Go Marching In. The lights flickered, signaling closing time. The patrons began to filter out. Drunks were helped into coats. Women searched for lost purses. The smoke began to settle into a stale haze near the floor. Clear the room, O'Malley ordered his head of security, a man named Bricks. Get everyone out. Fast. But keep the staff. By 1:50 a.m., the Gilded Lily was empty of customers. The chairs were being upturned onto tables. The busboys were sweeping up confetti and cigarette butts. Eddie was near the kitchen doors, looking pale. He checked his pocket watch. Boss, Eddie called out, his voice cracking slightly. I'm gonna go check the inventory in the back. Make sure we're set for tomorrow. O'Malley was sitting at the bar now, nursing a glass of water. Clara sat on the stool next to him. Sure, Eddie, O'Malley said, his voice easy. You do that. You're a hard-working man. I appreciate that about you. Eddie flinched, a flash of guilt crossing his face, but he forced a weak smile. Just doing my job, boss. Eddie disappeared through the swinging kitchen doors. The moment he was gone, O'Malley's demeanor shifted instantly. He spun on his stool. Bricks, he hissed. Kill the lights in the main room. Leave the emergency bulbs only. Everyone else behind the bar. Guns out. Safety off. The staff, waiters and bartenders who were clearly more than they appeared, moved with military precision. From beneath aprons and inside hollowed-out serving trays, revolvers and sawed-off shotguns appeared. Clara froze. "What do I do?" O'Malley grabbed her arm and pulled her off the stool. He dragged her behind the heavy mahogany bar. "You stay down. You count the rivets in the floorboards. You do not pop your head up unless I tell you to. Understand?" "Yes," Clara whispered, crouching down on the sawdust-covered floor. The smell of spilled beer and old wood was overpowering. "And, Clara?" She looked up. O'Malley was checking the cylinder of a snub-nosed .38 revolver. "If this goes right," he said, "you're going to need a better coat." The lights went out. The club was plunged into shadows, illuminated only by the faint red glow of the exit signs and the streetlights filtering through the high, barred windows. Silence descended. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, punctuated only by the distant drip of a faucet and the breathing of the men around her. Clara huddled under the bar, her knees drawn to her chest. She watched the second hand of the wall clock tick. Tick, tick, tick. 1:58 a.m. 1:59 a.m. 2 o'clock a.m. From the back of the club, through the kitchen doors, came the sound of a heavy metal latch being thrown. Clank! Then, the squeal of rusty hinges. Footsteps. They were soft, deliberate footsteps, not the frantic pace of a kitchen crew. These were the footsteps of men who knew how to walk without making a sound. Clara held her breath. She could hear Eddie's voice, a hushed whisper. "This way. Office is down the hall. Watch the squeaky board." "Shut up, Eddie," a rough voice growled. Not the scarred man. Someone else. The kitchen doors swung open. 3 silhouettes emerged into the dim light of the main room. They held flashlights, the beams cutting through the gloom, sweeping over the upturned chairs and the empty stage. "Clear," one of them said. "Looks like everyone's gone." "Let's hit the office. Vinny wants the safe combination and the roster," another said. They moved across the floor, their shoes crunching on stray peanut shells. They were heading for the corridor where O'Malley's office was located, and where Clara and the ambushers lay in wait behind the bar. They got within 10 feet of the bar. "Evening, gentlemen," O'Malley's voice rang out from the darkness. It was calm, polite, and absolutely terrifying. The 3 intruders froze. Their flashlight beams jerked wildly toward the bar. "I think you took a wrong turn," O'Malley said, standing up slowly. In his hand, the Carter .38 was leveled at the center man's chest. "The public library is 2 blocks over." "It's a trap!" one of the intruders yelled, reaching inside his jacket. "Don't!" O'Malley roared. Simultaneously, 6 shotguns racked from behind the bar. The sound was like a synchronized crack of doom. Click, clack. The intruders froze, their hands hovering near their lapels. They were outgunned, exposed, and surrounded. "Hands where I can see them," O'Malley ordered. "High, reach for the angels." Slowly, reluctantly, the 3 men raised their hands. They were tough guys, street soldiers, but they weren't suicidal. "Eddie!" O'Malley shouted without looking away from the gunmen. "Get your miserable hide out here." Silence from the kitchen. Then the sound of running footsteps, running away. "Bricks, get him," O'Malley said casually. Bricks vaulted over the bar like a gymnast and sprinted into the kitchen. A moment later, there was a crash of pots and pans, a high-pitched scream, and the sound of someone being dragged. Bricks returned, hauling Eddie by the scruff of his collar. Eddie was sobbing, his feet scrabbling uselessly on the floor. He was thrown down in front of the bar, right next to the 3 intruders. "Boss, please!" Eddie wailed, snot running down his nose. "They made me do it! They threatened my mother!" "I swear, Declan, I swear." O'Malley ignored him. He kept his gun trained on the intruders. "Search them. Take their iron. Tie them up in the storeroom." As his men moved to secure the prisoners, O'Malley looked down at Clara, who was peeking over the top of the bar. "You can get up now, Miss Vance," he said. "The show's over." Clara stood up, her legs shaking uncontrollably. She looked at the scene, the bound men, the weeping traitor, the guns. O'Malley reached into his inside jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick roll of bills. He peeled off 5 crisp $100 notes. He held them out to her. "A deal is a deal," he said. Clara reached out and took the money. The paper felt crisp and real. It was freedom. It was safety. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," O'Malley said, his eyes darkening. He turned to look at Eddie, who was curled in a fetal ball on the floor. "Because we're not done. We know what they planned. Now, we have to make sure they still think it's happening." Clara stared at him. "What do you mean?" O'Malley walked over to Eddie and crouched down. He grabbed Eddie's chin and forced him to look up. "You're going to stop crying, Eddie," O'Malley said softly. "And you're going to go to the phone. You're going to call Vinnie Moretti." I can't," Eddie stammered. "You can," O'Malley said, pressing the barrel of his gun gently against Eddie's cheek. "You're going to tell him the casing went fine. You're going to tell him the coast is clear. You're going to tell him that everything is set for Thursday." He stood up and looked at Clara. "Because on Thursday," O'Malley said, a grim smile touching his lips, "we're going to the pier. And Miss Vance here is going to help us spring the trap." Clara's blood ran cold. She clutched the money to her chest. "Me? I can't be part of a war. I just wanted the money." "You took the money, Clara," O'Malley said. "Now you're on the payroll. Vinnie knows your face. If he doesn't die on Thursday, you die on Friday. It's that simple." He gestured to the door. "Go home, get some sleep, but be back here tomorrow at noon. We have a performance to rehearse." Clara looked at the money in her hand, then at the men bound on the floor, and finally at O'Malley. She realized then that she hadn't just made a bargain for money. She had sold her soul to the devil to save her life. "Noon," Clara repeated, her voice hollow. "Noon," O'Malley confirmed. "And Clara, buy a warmer coat. It's going to be cold on the pier." Clara turned and walked toward the exit. The iron door opened for her, revealing the rainy Chicago night. It looked the same as when she had entered, but the world had changed. She wasn't just a singer anymore. She was a gangster's accomplice. She stepped out into the rain, clutching the $500, knowing that the hardest song she would ever have to sing was still to come. Moonshine, midnight. The 1924 Packard Single 6 was a beast of a machine. It smelled of oiled leather, stale tobacco, and the faint, sweet perfume of the woman sitting rigidly in the passenger seat. Clara Vance stared out the window into the consuming darkness. The city of Chicago had long since faded into a glow on the horizon behind them. Now, there was only the endless, flat expanse of the Illinois prairie, swallowed by the night and lashed by a relentless freezing rain. "You're grinding your teeth, Clara." O'Malley's voice came from the driver's seat. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the twin beams of the headlights cutting through the sleet. "I'm cold," Clara lied. She was wearing the new coat she had bought that morning with a fraction of O'Malley's money. A thick wool trench with a fur collar. It was the warmest thing she had ever owned, yet she was shivering. "You're scared," O'Malley corrected, shifting gears as the heavy car navigated a rut in the muddy road. "That's good. Fear keeps you awake. It's the comfortable ones who get put in a pine box." Clara turned to look at him. In the dashboard's dim light, his profile was sharp, almost hawk-like. He had left his usual entourage behind. No bricks, no granite-faced guards. Just him, her, and the Tommy gun resting on the back seat wrapped in an oilcloth. "Why am I here, Declan?" she asked, using his first name for the second time. It felt strange on her tongue, too intimate for a boss and his employee. "If this is a business run, why bring the singer?" Because a lone man driving a luxury car on these back roads at midnight looks like a bootlegger, O'Malley said calmly. But a man and a woman, that looks like a couple who took a wrong turn after a late dinner. You're my camouflage, Clara. I feel like a human shield, she muttered. Shields are replaceable, O'Malley said, glancing at her with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. You're not. Not until after Thursday. Thursday. The word hung in the air like smoke. Tomorrow night was the trap at Navy Pier, but tonight O'Malley had insisted on this excursion. Inventory management, he had called it. They were heading to a farm near Joliet to pick up 30 cases of Canadian gold. Real whiskey, not the rot-gut brewed in bathtubs. He needed it to bait the trap properly. Vinnie Moretti wouldn't bite on empty crates. The car slowed as they approached a dilapidated wooden bridge spanning a swollen creek. O'Malley killed the headlights. "Why did you turn the lights off?" Clara whispered, panic rising. "Protocol," he murmured. "We're entering neutral territory. Farmers out here shoot first and ask questions, never." They crept forward in darkness, the tires crunching on gravel. Ahead, a faint lantern glow appeared from the maw of a large, sagging barn. O'Malley stopped the car. He reached into the back seat, not for the Tommy gun, but for a heavy leather satchel. "Stay in the car," he ordered. "Keep the engine running. If you hear shooting, you stomp on that gas pedal and you drive. You don't wait for me. You drive until you see the lights of the loop." "I don't know how to drive a Packard," Clara hissed. "Then you better learn fast," he said, opening the door and stepping into the mud. Clara watched him walk toward the barn. The rain hammered on the roof, a deafening drum roll. She slid over to the driver's side, her hands gripping the massive steering wheel. It was cold and vibrating with the idle power of the engine. She saw the barn doors creak open. A man in overalls stepped out holding a double-barreled shotgun. He exchanged words with O'Malley. The tension was palpable, even from 50 yards away. Then the farmer lowered the gun. He whistled. 2 other men appeared, hauling wooden crates. They began loading them into the trunk of the Packard. Clara let out a breath she'd been holding. It was just a transaction, cash for liquid gold. O'Malley handed over the satchel. The farmer counted the stacks of bills, nodded, and spat on the ground. They shook hands. O'Malley turned and walked back to the car. He looked relieved. He opened the door and slid in, bringing the smell of wet wool and rain with him. "Easy as pie," he said, wiping water from his face. "Now, let's get this back to the city before the sun comes up." He put the car in gear and swung it around. The heavy trunk weighed down the rear suspension, making the car wallow in the mud. They hit the main road, a 2-lane strip of asphalt surrounded by cornfields. O'Malley switched the headlights back on. "You did good," he said, glancing at her. "Didn't panic. Didn't run." "I didn't have anywhere to run to," Clara said, staring at the windshield wipers fighting the rain. "So, this is it? We just drive back?" "That's the life," O'Malley said, reaching into his pocket for a cigar. "Hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror." As he struck the match, Clara saw something in the side mirror. 2 bright lights appeared in the distance behind them, far back but moving fast. "Declan," she said softly. "I see him," O'Malley said, shaking out the match. He didn't light the cigar. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The lights behind them were gaining, and then another set of lights appeared behind the first. 2 cars. "Cops?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "Cops use sirens," O'Malley said, his voice grim. "And they don't drive Fords with souped-up V8 engines. That's a hijack crew." "Vinny? Maybe. Or just freelance road pirates who saw a heavy car and smelled a payday." "Hold on." O'Malley stomped on the accelerator. The Packard roared. The engine whined as the speedometer climbed. 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. The car shuddered violently on the slick road. The cars behind them matched the speed. They were closing the gap. "Get down!" O'Malley shouted. Bang! The rear window shattered. Glass sprayed over the back seat. The sound of the gunshot was swallowed by the wind. But the hole in the glass was terrifyingly real. Clara screamed and ducked, curling into a ball in the passenger footwell. "Grab the wheel!" O'Malley yelled. "What?" "Grab the damn wheel, Clara! I need to shoot back." Clara scrambled up, terrified, and lunged across the console. She grabbed the bottom of the steering wheel with both hands. The car was hydroplaning, feeling like a boat on a stormy sea. O'Malley let go of the wheel. He twisted his body, reaching into the back seat. He ripped the oilcloth off the Tommy gun. "Keep it steady!" he roared. He smashed the rest of the rear window out with the butt of the gun. The wind howled into the cabin, freezing and wet. O'Malley leveled the submachine gun out the back window. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat! The muzzle flash lit up the interior of the car like a strobe light. The sound was deafening, a jackhammer assaulting Clara's eardrums. Casings clattered onto the leather seats. In the side mirror, Clara saw the lead pursuit car swerve violently. Sparks flew as bullets raked its hood. One of its headlights exploded. "I got the radiator!" O'Malley shouted, a savage grin on his face. "One down!" The lead car spun out, careening into the muddy ditch with a spray of water and dirt. But the second car swerved around it, not slowing down. A man was leaning out of the passenger window, a pistol in his hand. Bullets pinged off the Packard's trunk. Whang! Whang! "They're persistent, I'll give 'em that," O'Malley grunted. He swapped a drum magazine with practiced speed. "Clara, up ahead, sharp left, the access road." "I can't see!" Clara cried, peering over the dashboard. The rain was a gray curtain. "Just turn when I say turn." O'Malley leaned back out the window, firing another burst. The pursuit car returned fire. A bullet punched through the passenger door, inches from Clara's hip. She yelped. "Now! Turn now!" Clara wrenched the wheel to the left. The Packard drifted, the heavy tail swinging out. For a second, Clara thought they were going to roll. The tires screamed, fighting for grip on the wet asphalt. They skidded onto a dirt track, bouncing violently. O'Malley was thrown against the doorframe, but kept his grip on the gun. "Straighten it out! Gas it!" he yelled. Clara stomped on the pedal. The car fish-tailed, spraying mud, then found traction. They tore down the narrow dirt path, trees whipping past like ghosts. The second pursuit car tried to make the turn but was going too fast. Clara watched in the mirror as its headlights swept across the trees, then vanished as the car overshot the turn and plowed straight into the cornfield. O'Malley watched for a moment, waiting to see if they would recover. The lights in the cornfield stayed stationary. "They're stuck," O'Malley breathed, slumping back into his seat. He engaged the safety on the Tommy gun and tossed it into the back. He reached over and gently took the wheel from Clara's death grip. "I got it. You can let go." Clara's fingers were locked. She was hyperventilating, her eyes wide and unblinking. Are they dead?" "Doesn't matter," O'Malley said, his voice hard. He steered the car deeper into the woods, slowing down. "They aren't following us." He pulled the car to a stop under the shelter of a large oak tree. The engine ticked as it cooled. The rain was softer here, filtered by the branches. O'Malley turned on the interior light. He looked at Clara. She was pale, her hair plastered to her forehead, her new coat covered in shards of glass. "You're bleeding," he said softly. Clara looked down. There was a small cut on her cheek from the flying glass. She hadn't even felt it. O'Malley pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. He reached out and dabbed the cut, gently. His hand was warm, and unlike hers, it was perfectly steady. "You drove a getaway car, Clara," he said, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. "Not many singers can put that on their resume." Clara slapped his hand away. "Is this a game to you?" she shouted, the adrenaline finally crashing into anger. "People were shooting at us. We could have died. For what? For whiskey? For survival!" O'Malley snapped back, his eyes flashing. "This isn't a game. It's a war. And you're the one who walked into my club and asked for a job. You're the one who took the $500. I didn't know it would be like this." "Then you were naive," O'Malley said ruthlessly. "But you're not naive anymore. You held that wheel. You kept us on the road. You saved my life. And you saved your own." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Welcome to the real world, Clara. It's dirty, it's bloody, and it's loud. But it's the only one where people like us get to be kings and queens." Clara stared at him. She hated him in that moment. She hated his arrogance, his violence, his world. But beneath the hate, there was something else. A thrill, a dark electric current that she had never felt waiting tables or washing dishes. She touched the cut on her cheek. It stung. "Is the whiskey okay?" she asked, her voice flat. O'Malley stared at her for a second, then threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, honest laugh that released the tension in the small cabin. "The whiskey is fine," he said, wiping his eyes. "And so are we." He put the car back in gear. "Let's go home, Clara. We have a trap to set." As the Packard crawled back onto the main road, heading toward the distant glow of Chicago, Clara looked out the broken back window. The rain was washing away the tire tracks, erasing the evidence of their violence. But nothing could wash away what she had just done. She wasn't just an observer anymore. She was an accomplice. And as the city lights grew closer, she realized with a terrifying clarity that she wasn't sure if she wanted to get out. A dance with danger. Wednesday night at the Gilded Lily was usually a quiet affair, a lull between the frantic energy of the weekend and the inevitable hangover of Monday. But this Wednesday, the air inside the basement club was heavy enough to crack a rib. To the casual observer, nothing was amiss. The jazz was hot, the gin was cold, and the laughter was loud. But to the handful of people who knew what was coming at dawn, the club was a stage set for a tragedy. Clara stood in the wings of the stage, smoothing the silk of her new dress. It was emerald green, bought with O'Malley's money, and it clung to her frame like a second skin. She looked every inch the siren, but her hands were ice cold. In the corner of the musician's alcove sat Eddie. The traitorous manager looked like a man walking to the gallows. His skin was the color of old parchment, and he was sweating so profusely that his collar was soaked through. Bricks, the head of security, stood in the shadows just behind him, a silent, hulking reminder that Eddie had a gun pressed to his back, metaphorically and perhaps literally. "He looks like he's going to vomit on the customers," Clara whispered. Doc, seated at the piano, didn't look up from his keys. "Let him. As long as he keeps his mouth shut about tomorrow, he can bleed from his ears for all I care." Doc knew. By now, the inner circle all knew. Clara took a deep breath. She stepped out into the spotlight. The applause was genuine. In just 2 nights, word had spread about the girl with the blue voice. The room was packed, but as Clara scanned the crowd, her heart skipped a beat. There, sitting at a table near the center of the room, bold as brass and twice as hard, was Vinny the Scalpel Moretti. He wasn't hiding in the shadows tonight. He was surrounded by 3 of his own men. He was drinking O'Malley's gin, smoking O'Malley's air, and smiling a smile that looked like a jagged wound. He was here to gloat. He was here to inspect the kingdom he thought he would inherit in 24 hours. Clara gripped the microphone stand. "Don't look at him," she told herself. "Look at the lights. Look at the back wall." But Vinny's eyes were magnetic in their malice. He raised a glass to her, a silent toast. Clara signaled the band. Masquerader, she murmured. Up-tempo. She sang, but her mind was racing. O'Malley was in his usual booth, looking relaxed, bored even. He was playing his part perfectly. The oblivious king unaware that the assassins were at the gate. But Clara saw the way his hand rested on the table, fingers tapping a rhythm that had nothing to do with the music. As she finished the set, the applause washed over her. She bowed, desperate to retreat to the safety of the dressing room. Brava! The voice cut through the applause like a whip. Vinnie Moretti stood up. He walked toward the stage, ignoring the sudden hush that fell over the room. The rivalry between the North Side and West Side was no secret. Seeing a lieutenant of the O'Banion gang in O'Malley's territory was like seeing a shark in a swimming pool. Vinnie stopped at the edge of the stage. Up close, the scar on his jaw was pearlescent and knotted. You got a voice that could make a priest kick out a stained glass window, Vinnie said, grinning. His teeth were yellowed and sharp. Thank you, Clara said, her voice tight. She tried to step down, but Vinnie blocked her path. What's your rush, doll? Vinnie asked. I wanted to offer you a job. The room went deadly silent. Offering a job to a rival's talent in their own house was a deliberate insult. It was an act of war. I have a job, Clara said, lifting her chin. Mr. O'Malley treats me well. Vinnie laughed, a dry, hacking sound. O'Malley, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. O'Malley is yesterday's news. You want to hitch your wagon to a rising star, sweetheart. By Friday, this place is gonna have new management, new drapes, better liquor. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a serpentine whisper. And I remember faces. I remember seeing you Monday night. You saw something you shouldn't have, but I'm a forgiving man. If you know how to pick the winning side. Clara felt sick. He was giving her an out. Betray O'Malley and live. Stay loyal and die with the rest of them tomorrow. She opened her mouth to speak, but a shadow fell over them. Is the gentleman bothering you, Miss Vance? Declan O'Malley stood there. He hadn't rushed. He hadn't shouted. He had simply materialized, radiating a cold, terrifying calm. Vinnie straightened up, turning to face O'Malley. The two men stood chest to chest, giants of the underworld. Just paying my respects to the talent, Declan, Vinnie sneered. Didn't know you kept your birds in a cage. She's not in a cage, O'Malley said smoothly. She's free to go wherever she pleases. But she has taste. That's why she sings for me, and not for a two-bit butcher shop on the North Side. The insult landed. Vinnie's eyes narrowed into slits. His hand twitched toward his coat. Behind the bar, 3 bartenders simultaneously stopped polishing glasses. The tension in the room was so thick it was suffocating. One wrong word, one sudden move, and the gilded lily would turn into a shooting gallery. Vinnie chuckled, diffusing the moment, though his eyes remained deadly. You always did have a sharp tongue, Declan. Enjoy the music while it lasts. I plan to, O'Malley said. Vinnie turned to leave, but O'Malley spoke again. Actually, Vinnie, since you're here, why don't you watch how we do things on the West Side? We don't just listen to the music. We feel it. O'Malley turned to the band. Doc, a tango, something with teeth. He turned back to Clara and extended his hand. Miss Vance, would you do me the honor? Clara stared at his hand. It was a power move, a public display of ownership and confidence. If he danced, it showed he wasn't afraid. It showed he wasn't worried about Vinnie or tomorrow. She placed her hand in his. The honor is mine, Mr. O'Malley. O'Malley pulled her close, closer than was proper for 1924. His arm was a steel band around her waist. The music started, a sharp staccato violin line, followed by the dramatic pulse of the accordion and piano. They moved, Clara wasn't a professional dancer, but O'Malley led with such force and precision that she didn't need to be. He spun her, dipped her, moved her across the parquet floor with a predatory grace. "Don't look at him," O'Malley whispered in her ear as they turned. "Look at me. He knows," Clara whispered back, her breath hitching as he dipped her low. "He just told me. He said by Friday there will be new management." "He's posturing," O'Malley murmured, pulling her up chest to chest. "He thinks he's already won. That makes him sloppy." They glided across the floor. The crowd watched, mesmerized. It was a beautiful, dangerous spectacle. The mob boss and his singer, dancing on the edge of a volcano. "Are we ready for tomorrow?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "The trap is set," O'Malley said. He spun her out, then reeled her back in, his hand gripping hers tight. "The police captain he bribed, Miller. I had a chat with him this morning. Showed him some photos of him leaving a certain hotel with a woman who isn't his wife. Miller is going to be late to the pier tomorrow. Vinny won't have his backup. And the whiskey? Loaded in the trucks, bait for the rats." O'Malley looked down at her. For a moment, the mask slipped. The hardened gangster was gone, replaced by a man looking at a woman who had stood by him in a gunfight. "You look beautiful, Clara," he said softly. "Green suits you." Clara felt a flush that had nothing to do with the exertion of the dance. "Don't get sentimental, Declan. You haven't paid me the rest of my money yet." O'Malley smirked. "Mercenary. I like that." The music reached a crescendo. O'Malley spun her one last time, catching her in a dramatic finale pose. They froze there, breathing hard, the spotlight burning them. The room erupted in applause. O'Malley didn't let go immediately. He held her gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then he straightened his jacket and stepped back. He turned to Vinny's table. "That," O'Malley said, his voice ringing out, "is how we do it on the West Side." Vinny Moretti didn't clap. He stood up, buttoned his trench coat, and signaled his men. "Nice show, Declan," Vinny called out. "Enjoy the memory." He walked out, his men trailing him like shadows. As the heavy iron door slammed shut behind them, the air rushed back into the room. The patrons laughed nervously, ordering more drinks, relieved that violence had been averted. O'Malley guided Clara off the floor. As soon as they were out of sight of the crowd, near the kitchen doors, his demeanor shifted. The charm vanished. He was the general again. "Bricks!" he snapped. The security chief appeared. "Get Eddie into the cellar. Lock him in. If he so much as sneezes before tomorrow night, gag him." "Right, boss." O'Malley turned to Clara. "Go home. Pack a bag." "Pack a bag?" Clara asked, alarmed. "I thought we were winning." "We are," O'Malley said grimly. "But in a war, even the winners get muddy. If things go wrong at the pier, if I don't walk away, there's a train ticket to St. Louis in an envelope at the bar with your name on it, along with the rest of your cash." Clara felt a cold knot in her stomach. "You think you might not walk away? Vinny is bringing a Tommy gun to a knife fight. I'm bringing a cannon. But bullets don't have names, Clara. They just go where they're pointed." He reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we end this." He turned and walked toward his office, barking orders at his men. Clara stood alone in the hallway. The music from the main room drifted back, a slow, melancholy tune. She thought about the train ticket waiting for her. St. Louis. Safety. A fresh start. She could take it now. She could grab the envelope and leave tonight. No one would blame her. But as she touched the spot on her waist where O'Malley's hand had been, she knew she wasn't going anywhere. She wasn't just Clara Vance, the girl from the slums anymore. She was part of the Gilded Lily, and she would see this through to the bitter, bloody end. Whispers in the smoke. Silence in a speakeasy is a heavy thing. It has mass and texture. It is composed of the echoes of 1,000 conversations, the ghostly resonance of brass instruments, and the settling dust of illicit joy. It was 3:30 a.m. The Gilded Lily was empty. The last drunk had been poured into a taxi. The last waiter had hung up his apron and slipped out the back. Even the air felt exhausted, hanging in blue-gray layers of stale cigar smoke under the dim emergency lights. Clara Vance stood at the bar, her finger tracing the rim of a glass that had been left behind. Next to her hand sat a thick, creamy envelope. She knew what was inside without opening it. A train ticket to St. Louis, a stack of cash, a new identity, perhaps. It was the escape hatch O'Malley had promised her. It was the sensible thing, the safe thing. She picked up the envelope. It felt heavy, like holding a brick of gold. All she had to do was walk out the door, go to Union Station, and wait for the first train south. By the time the shooting started at Navy Pier tonight, she could be watching the cornfields of southern Illinois roll by, safe and anonymous. She looked at the iron door. Then she looked toward the back of the room, where a single stream of light spilled from the open door of O'Malley's office. Clara sighed, a sound that was half frustration, half resignation, and shoved the envelope into her purse. She wasn't going to St. Louis. Not yet. She walked across the empty dance floor, her heels clicking rhythmically on the parquet where hours earlier she had danced with a king. She approached the office door and tapped lightly on the frame. "I thought I told you to go home." Declan O'Malley was sitting behind his massive oak desk. He wasn't working. He was slumped in his leather chair, his tie undone, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and crisscrossed with faint scars. A half-empty bottle of Irish whiskey sat on the desk, alongside 2 glasses. He didn't look up as she entered. He was staring at a framed photograph on his desk. A sepia-toned picture of a group of young men in military uniforms, smiling in a muddy trench. "You did," Clara said, stepping into the room. "But I'm not very good at following orders. I think we've established that." O'Malley looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, stripped of the sharp, predatory gleam they held in public. He looked older. He looked like a man carrying a mountain on his back. "St. Louis is nice this time of year," he said, his voice raspy. "Quiet. Boring. You'd like it." "I don't like boring," Clara said. She walked over to the chair opposite his desk and sat down, crossing her legs. "And I don't like leaving things unfinished." O'Malley studied her for a moment, then reached for the bottle. He poured a generous measure into the second glass and slid it across the mahogany surface toward her. "To unfinished business," he murmured, raising his own glass. "To staying alive," Clara corrected, taking the glass. The whiskey burned pleasantly on its way down, settling like a warm coal in her stomach. For a long time they didn't speak. The only sound was the hum of the desk lamp and the distant settling of the building. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was the companionable silence of 2 people who were waiting for a storm. "That photo," Clara said softly, nodding at the frame. "France." O'Malley nodded, his gaze drifting back to the picture. 1918, the Argonne Forest. That's me on the left, the one with the stupid grin. "And the others?" "Dead," he said simply. "Gas, machine guns, influenza. Take your pick. The world found a lot of ways to kill boys back then." He took a drink, his face darkening. "We went over there thinking we were saving the world. Woodrow Wilson and his Make the World Safe for Democracy speech. We crawled through mud, we ate rats, we watched our friends dissolve in mustard gas. And for what?" He gestured around the opulent office, at the illegal liquor, at the piles of cash on the safe. "We came back and they passed a law telling us we couldn't even have a beer to forget what we saw. The government that sent us to die decided it needed to legislate our morality." He laughed bitterly. "So, I decided if they were going to make me a criminal for wanting a drink, I might as well be the best damn criminal in Chicago. Clara watched him, seeing the cracks in the armor. This wasn't the gangster talking. This was the soldier who never really came home. Is that why you do it? She asked. Spite? Control, O'Malley corrected. In the trenches, you had no control. You lived or died by chance. A shell lands here, you die. It lands 3 feet to the left, you live. I hated that. Here. He spread his hands. Here I control the odds. I control who eats, who drinks, and who bleeds. It's the only way I can sleep. He looked at her, his eyes softening slightly. What about you, Clara? What's your war? A girl with a voice like yours. You shouldn't be mixed up with trash like us. You should be on a marquee in New York. Clara twirled the whiskey in her glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. My war is smaller, but it feels just as big to me. She took a breath. She hadn't told anyone the truth. Not really, but tonight, with the shadow of death hanging over Thursday, lies felt heavy. My sister, Rose, Clara began quietly. She's 3 years younger than me. She wanted to be a dancer. She was light, just pure light. Clara's voice hitched. She cleared her throat. Last winter, the heating in our tenement went out. The landlord wouldn't fix it. We huddled under blankets for weeks. She got a cough, then a fever, then blood. Tuberculosis, O'Malley whispered. The White Plague. It was the silent killer of the poor. The sanatorium in Naperville said they could help her, Clara continued. Fresh air, good food, medicine. But it costs $40 a week. I was making $6 a week washing dishes. She looked up at O'Malley, her eyes fierce and wet. I tried everything, Declan. I sang on street corners. I sold everything we owned. It wasn't enough. I came to that alley door on Monday night because the doctor said if I didn't pay the arrears by Friday, they were putting her out on the street. O'Malley stared at her. He looked at the emerald dress he had bought her, the way she held her head high despite the weight of her story. So you walked into a lion's den, he said softly, to save a lamb. I'd walk into hell for her, Clara said. I still would. O'Malley stood up. He walked around the desk. Clara tensed, not sure what he was doing. He leaned against the edge of the desk, right in front of her chair, looming over her but not menacingly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key, a small brass key. He placed it on the table next to her drink. That opens a safe deposit box at the First National Bank, O'Malley said. Box 402. Inside, there's $5,000 in bonds. Bearer bonds. Untraceable. Clara stared at the key. $5,000. That would pay for Rose's care for years. It would buy a house. It was a fortune. Why? She whispered. Because if I catch a bullet tonight at the pier, O'Malley said, his voice devoid of emotion, the state will seize everything I own. The cops will loot this office. Vinny will take the rest. That money. It serves no purpose sitting in a dark box. It should go to someone who fights for the living. He leaned down, placing a hand on the arm of her chair, boxing her in. His face was inches from hers. She could smell the whiskey and the tobacco, but also the clean scent of soap. You're a fighter, Clara. I recognized it the moment you stared down Sal at the door. We're the same. We're both just trying to keep the cold out. Clara looked at the key, then up at him. The distance between them felt electrically charged. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. You're not going to die, Declan, she said fiercely. You control the odds, remember? Sometimes the house wins, he murmured. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. For a moment, Clara thought he was going to kiss her. She wanted him to. The danger, the shared secrets, the raw vulnerability of the night. It all pulled them together like magnets. She tilted her head up slightly, her breath catching. O'Malley leaned in. His hand came up to cup her cheek. his thumb brushing the small cut she had received from the car window. "Clara," he breathed. Ring. The shrill, mechanical sound of the telephone on the desk shattered the moment like a hammer hitting glass. They both jumped. O'Malley pulled back instantly, the soldier mask slamming back into place. He cursed under his breath and snatched the receiver off the hook. "Yeah," he barked into the mouthpiece. Clara let out a shaky breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. She picked up the key and closed her fist around it. O'Malley listened for a moment, his face hardening. "You're sure? All right, don't engage, just watch him. If he moves, you call me back." He slammed the phone down. "Problem?" Clara asked, her voice steadying. "That was a scout," O'Malley said, buttoning his collar and reaching for his tie. "Vinny's crew is on the move early. They're gathering at a garage on the north side. Looks like they're loading up for a war." He looked at the clock. 4:15 a.m. "The sun is coming up," he said. "The waiting is over." He looked at Clara. The intimacy of the moment before was gone, replaced by the urgent cold reality of survival. "Go to the dressing room," he ordered. "There's a cot there. Get 2 hours of sleep. We leave for the pier at noon to set the positions." "And you?" Clara asked, standing up. "I have to make a call to Captain Miller," O'Malley said, a cruel glint returning to his eyes. "I need to remind him exactly what happens to his pension if he decides to develop a conscience today." Clara nodded. She walked to the door, but stopped and turned back. "Declan?" He looked up from the desk, where he was already loading a fresh magazine into his .45 automatic. "Thank you," she said, holding up the fist with the key. "For Rose." O'Malley paused. He looked at her, and for a split second, the sadness returned. "Make sure she learns to dance," he said softly. Clara nodded and slipped out into the dark hallway. She walked to the dressing room, but she didn't sleep. She lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, clutching the brass key in one hand and the train ticket in the other. 2 paths. One led to safety, to a quiet life, to a guarantee that her sister would be cared for. The other led to a wet pier, gunfire, and a man who carried the ghosts of a war in his eyes. Clara Vance closed her eyes. She put the train ticket inside her purse and snapped it shut. Then she took the brass key and strung it onto the silver chain around her neck, tucking it under her dress, right against her heart. She was done running. She was done hiding in alleys. The whispers in the smoke had told her who she really was. She wasn't a victim. She was a partner. And when the sun rose over Chicago, she would be ready to fight. Here is Chapter 7 of the story. The Speakeasy Secret, Shadows of the Jazz Age. Chapter 7. The Snitch. Daylight didn't suit the gilded lily. Without the dimming grace of amber lamps and cigarette smoke, the club looked tired. The velvet curtains showed their dust. The gold paint on the pillars revealed itself to be chipping plaster. The floor was scuffed and scarred from 1,000 dancing heels. It was 1:00 p.m. on Thursday. The club was locked tight, but inside it hummed with the quiet, deadly industry of a munitions factory. Tables had been pushed against the walls. In the center of the dance floor, Declan O'Malley stood over a large hand-drawn map of Navy Pier spread out on a card table. He was flanked by Bricks and a dozen other men, hard-looking veterans of street wars who checked their weapons with the casual familiarity of carpenters checking their hammers. Clara stood near the bar, nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold hours ago. She wore her new coat, the collar turned up, her hands deep in the pockets where her fingers brushed against the brass key O'Malley had given her. "All right, listen up," O'Malley said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. He pointed to the map. "The trucks arrive at the east loading dock at midnight. That's the bait. Vinny thinks he's hitting a skeleton crew. He thinks Eddie cleared the way." He looked at Bricks. "Where is our star witness?" "Still in the cellar, boss," Bricks grunted. He stopped crying mostly, just staring at the wall. "Clean him up," O'Malley ordered. "Put him in a fresh suit. I want him looking terrified, but functional. He has to stand at the dock and wave the trucks in. If Vinny sees Eddie, he'll think the fix is in. O'Malley traced a line on the map. Once Vinny's men move out of cover to seize the trucks, we hit them from the high ground. I want 2 men on the warehouse roof with rifles. Bricks, you take the main squad behind the crates on the south side. I'll be in the office overlooking the dock with the Tommy gun. And the girl? One of the gunmen asked, nodding toward Clara. O'Malley glanced at her. Clara stays in the car. It'll be parked at the end of the pier, engine running. If things go south, she drives. Alone. Clara stiffened. I thought I was part of the plan. You are, O'Malley said. You're the extraction team. If we don't come back to the car in 20 minutes after the shooting starts, you leave. That's the order. The men nodded. It was a solid plan. A classic pincer movement. Ambush the ambushers. We move out in 30 minutes, O'Malley announced. Load the cars. Check your ammo. No mistakes. The meeting broke up. The men dispersed to gather their gear. O'Malley stayed at the table, staring at the map as if trying to divine the future from the ink lines. Clara walked over to him. You didn't tell them about Miller. Captain Miller is handled, O'Malley said without looking up. I sent a courier to his precinct with the photos. He'll be too busy sweating to send backup for Vinny. You seem very confident, Clara said softly. O'Malley straightened up and looked at her. He looked exhausted, but the fire was still there, in his green eyes. I have to be. Doubt is contagious. If they see me waver, we lose before we even leave the building. He checked his pocket watch. Go get your bag, Clara. We're leaving soon. Clara nodded. She turned and walked toward the dressing room corridor. The hallway was dark, the air stagnant. She felt a strange unease prickling at the back of her neck. It wasn't just the fear of the coming violence. It was something else. A sense that a shoe was waiting to drop. She reached the dressing room door. It was slightly ajar. She frowned. She had closed it earlier when she retrieved her coat. She pushed the door open quietly. Inside, the lights were off, save for the glow of the vanity bulbs which had been dimmed low. The room should have been empty. The dancers had been sent home yesterday. But someone was there. Sitting at Clara's makeshift vanity, huddled over the table, was a figure. It was Ruby, the girl with the sharp bob and the silver-fringed dress. Ruby wasn't looking at the mirror. She was hunched over, frantically whispering into the receiver of the wall-mounted telephone that the girls used to call cabs. Clara froze in the doorway. Ruby shouldn't be here. O'Malley had cleared the building of non-essential staff. Yeah, I know, Ruby whispered, her voice trembling. I'm telling you, it's a setup. They have rifles. Yes, Navy Pier, midnight. Clara's blood turned to ice. Ruby wasn't calling a cab. She was calling the enemy. Clara stepped into the room. The floorboard creaked. Ruby spun around, dropping the receiver. It swung on its cord, hitting the wall with a dull thud. Clara, Ruby gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. I didn't hear you come in. Clara looked at the swinging phone, then at Ruby. Who were you talking to? My mother, Ruby stammered, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. She's sick. I just wanted to check on her before I left town. O'Malley said we should lay low, right? You were talking about rifles, Clara said, her voice low and steady. She stepped closer. You were talking about the pier. Ruby's smile vanished. Her posture changed. The flighty flapper girl disappeared, replaced by something harder, sharper. She stood up, smoothing her silver dress. You have big ears, Canary, Ruby sneered. First you listen in on Eddie, now me? You really need to learn some manners. You're the snitch, Clara realized, the pieces falling into place. Eddie wasn't the only one. Vinny bought you too. Eddie is a fool, Ruby spat. He sold out for money. I sold out for love. Or what passes for it in this city. She took a step toward the door, but Clara blocked her path. Vinny Moretti doesn't love anyone, Clara said. He's a butcher. He's going to be the king, Ruby corrected. And I'm going to be his queen. Do you think I want to spend the rest of my life shaking my tail feathers for O'Malley's drunk friends? Vinny promised me a club of my own, up north, where the money is clean. You told him, Clara said, feeling sick. You told him it's a trap. Of course I did, Ruby said, reaching into her purse. I told him everything. The roof, the crates, the car. Vinny isn't walking into an ambush, honey. He's bringing the ambush. Ruby's hand came out of her purse. She wasn't holding a compact. She was holding a small pearl-handled Derringer pistol. It was a toy of a gun, barely bigger than her hand, but at this range it was deadly. Move, Ruby ordered, pointing the tiny barrel at Clara's chest. Clara stared at the gun. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. You can't shoot me, Clara said, her voice shaking. The boys are just down the hall. They'll hear it. With all the noise of them loading the crates, maybe, Ruby shrugged. But you'll be dead before they get here. And I know the back way out. Now, move. Clara took a step back. Her mind raced. If Ruby left, Vinny would know that O'Malley knew. No, wait. Ruby said she already told him. The damage was done. Vinny knew the plan. If O'Malley walked into that warehouse tonight, he was a dead man. You're making a mistake, Ruby, Clara said, raising her hand slowly. Vinny won't give you a club. He'll use you and toss you aside. Just like Eddie. Shut up! Ruby snapped, her hand shaking. You don't know him. Now get in the closet. Go! She gestured with the gun toward the small costume closet in the corner. Clara took a step toward the closet. As she moved, her foot brushed against a discarded feather boa on the floor. An idea, desperate and dangerous, sparked in her mind. She feigned a stumble. My heel. Clara dropped to one knee. Get up! Ruby hissed, stepping closer, the gun lowering slightly as she looked down. Clara grabbed the feather boa. With a grunt of exertion, she whipped it upward. The massive feathers slapped Ruby across the face, blinding her for a split second. Bang! The Derringer went off. The sound was a sharp crack, like a dry branch snapping. Clara felt the wind of the bullet pass her ear. It shattered the mirror behind her. Clara lunged. She drove her shoulder into Ruby's midsection. They both went down in a tangle of limbs and silver fringe. Ruby was thin, but she fought like a wildcat. She clawed at Clara's face, screaming. Clara grabbed Ruby's wrist, trying to twist the gun away. They rolled across the floor, knocking over the vanity stool. Let go! Ruby shrieked, biting Clara's arm. Clara cried out but didn't let go. She slammed Ruby's hand against the floorboards. Once, twice. The little gun skittered away, sliding under a rack of costumes. Ruby scrambled for it, but Clara was faster. She grabbed a heavy can of hairspray from the floor and swung it. Thwack! It connected with the side of Ruby's head. Ruby slumped forward, groaning, and collapsed onto the floor. Clara scrambled back, gasping for air. Her hair was a mess, her cheek was bleeding where Ruby had scratched her, and her arm throbbed. She looked at the door. Had they heard? Silence from the hallway. The thick walls of the basement and the distance to the main room had muffled the small-caliber shot. Clara stood up, her legs shaking. She looked down at Ruby. The girl was unconscious but breathing. Clara grabbed a roll of costume tape from the vanity. She bound Ruby's hands and feet, then used a silk scarf to gag her. She dragged the unconscious dancer into the costume closet and wedged a chair under the handle. She stood there for a moment, chest heaving. Vinny knows, The realization hit her like a physical blow. The trap was blown. The hunters were the prey. She had to tell O'Malley. Clara ran out of the dressing room, down the dark hallway, and burst into the main room. The men were just finishing loading the crates of ammunition. O'Malley was putting on his trench coat. He looked up as Clara came running in. He saw the scratch on her face, the wild look in her eyes. "Clara!" He stepped forward, his hand going to his holster. "What happened?" "Ruby!" Clara gasped, skidding to a halt in front of him. It was Ruby. She's the second snitch. The room went deadly quiet. "Where is she?" Bricks growled. "Closet. Unconscious," Clara said breathlessly. "But it's too late, Declan." She made a call. She told Vinny everything. The roof, the ambush, the crates. He knows it all. O'Malley froze. His face went pale, then red with suppressed rage. He closed his eyes for a second, a muscle in his jaw jumping. "He knows the positions," O'Malley whispered. "He'll have men waiting for us on the roof. He'll rig the warehouse. We'd be walking into a slaughterhouse." "We have to call it off," Brick said urgently. "Boss, we can't go. We hole up here. Defend the club." O'Malley opened his eyes. He looked around at his men. Fear was starting to creep into their expressions. They were soldiers, but nobody wanted to walk into a fixed fight. "If we stay here," O'Malley said slowly, "Vinny wins. He takes the shipment. He takes the territory. We starve to death in this basement while he rules the city." "But we can't go to the pier," Clara cried. "It's suicide!" O'Malley looked at the map on the table. He stared at it intensely, his mind working furiously. "He knows Plan A," O'Malley murmured. "He expects us to be on the roof. He expects us to wait for him to attack the trucks." He looked up, a dangerous, reckless light kindling in his eyes. "So we don't go to the roof, and we don't wait." "What are you saying?" Bricks asked. "I'm saying we flip the board," O'Malley said, his voice rising with newfound energy. "Vinny is expecting a defensive ambush. He's expecting us to be hiding, waiting for him to make the first move. So, we don't hide." He slammed his hand down on the map. "We attack." "Attack?" Clara asked. "Attack who?" "We hit them before they get set up," O'Malley said. "Vinny will be staging his men at the pier early to set his own trap. He'll be there at 10 o'clock p.m., getting his snipers in place." He looked at his men. "We aren't going at midnight. We're going now." "In daylight?" Bricks asked, incredulous. "Boss, the pier is public. There are civilians." "It's a rainy Thursday in November," O'Malley countered. "The pier will be empty. We go in hard. We go in fast. We catch Vinny while he's still handing out orders. We don't use the roof. We come in from the water." "The water?" Clara asked. "My cousin has a rum-running boat docked at the yacht club," O'Malley said. "We take the boat. We come up under the pier. We pop up right under their feet while they're watching the street for our trucks." He turned to Bricks. "Get the trucks. Load them with empty crates. I want a decoy convoy driving down the main strip to draw their eyes. Put dummies in the driver's seats if you have to. The rest of us, we're going for a boat ride." He turned to Clara. "You said you wanted to fight, Clara." "I didn't say I wanted to drown," she shot back, though her fear was mixing with the adrenaline. "You won't drown," O'Malley said. "But plans have changed. I can't leave you in the car anymore. The street isn't safe." He reached out and wiped a smudge of blood from her cheek. Ruby's blood. "You're coming on the boat," he said. "You stay in the cabin. Keep your head down. But if we pull this off, you'll have a front-row seat to the end of Vinny Moretti." Clara looked at him. It was madness. It was desperate. It was the only chance they had. "What about Eddie?" she asked. O'Malley's face hardened. "Eddie drives the lead truck. If Vinny blows it up, well, Eddie finally pays his tab. He clapped his hands. Let's move. We have 1 hour to get to the harbor. Leave Ruby in the closet. She can tell her story to the rats. The room exploded into motion. The hesitation was gone, replaced by the frantic energy of a new, desperate plan. Clara stood amidst the chaos. She touched the key around her neck. The snitch had tried to kill them, but instead she had forced them to do the one thing Vinnie Moretti would never expect. Clara Vance grabbed her purse. She checked the small pocket knife she kept inside, her only weapon. "Let's go to the water," she whispered. The raid on the blind tiger. The plan was audacious, it was desperate, and it lasted exactly 10 minutes. Clara stood by the back door of the Gilded Lily, clutching her purse. The kitchen staff had already fled. The only people left were O'Malley's core crew. 12 men in trench coats, armed with shotguns and Thompson submachine guns, looking like undertakers preparing for a busy season. O'Malley was barking final orders. "Bricks, take the lead truck. Eddie drives. If he tries to jump out, run him over. We meet at the yacht club in 20 minutes. "Got it, boss." Bricks moved to open the heavy steel door to the alley. He threw the latch and shoved. The door didn't move. Bricks frowned. He shoved again, putting his shoulder into it. "It's stuck. Something's blocking it from the outside." O'Malley froze. He looked at the door, then at the ceiling. "It's not stuck," he whispered. "It's barred." Boom! The sound came from the front of the club, the main iron door at the top of the stairs. It was a thunderous metallic crash that shook the dust from the rafters. Boom! "Police! Open up!" The voice was amplified, booming down the stairwell. It wasn't the polite knock of a beat cop looking for a bribe. It was the roar of a battering ram. "Miller!" O'Malley hissed, his face twisting into a snarl. "He didn't wait. Vinnie must have panicked when Ruby didn't call back. He sent the dogs early." "They're hitting the front!" a gunman shouted. "They blocked the back," O'Malley yelled, racking the slide of his Tommy gun. "It's a kill box! Take cover! Turn the tables over!" The basement exploded into chaos. The men scrambled, flipping the heavy oak tables onto their sides to create barricades. Clara stood frozen near the kitchen, her eyes wide. Boom, clang. The front door gave way. A flood of blue uniforms poured down the stairs. But these weren't ordinary officers making an arrest. They came in firing. Bang, 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 bang. Bullets chewed into the plaster archway at the bottom of the stairs. A mirror behind the bar shattered, spraying shards of glass over the rows of expensive liquor. "Light 'em up!" O'Malley roared. The speakeasy turned into a war zone. The roar of the Tommy guns was deafening in the enclosed space. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Sawdust flew into the air. Bottles exploded, filling the room with the pungent scent of gin and whiskey mixing with gunpowder. Clara dropped to the floor, crawling on her hands and knees behind the solid marble counter of the bar. Glass rained down on her. She covered her head, screaming silently. She saw a police officer reach the bottom of the stairs, only to be cut down by a blast from Bricks's shotgun. The officer fell, tumbling into a table. "There's too many of them!" Bricks yelled, reloading. "They're using tear gas!" A metal canister clattered down the stairs, hissing as it spun across the parquet dance floor. Thick white smoke began to billow out, stinging the eyes and throat. O'Malley was crouched behind an overturned table near the center of the room, firing short, controlled bursts up the stairs. He looked wild, a demon of smoke and fire. "The back door!" he shouted to Bricks. "Blow the hinges!" "I can't," Bricks yelled back, coughing. "It's reinforced steel. We'd need dynamite." They were trapped. The police, corrupt, bought and paid for by Vinnie Moretti, were pushing down the stairs behind a wall of riot shields. They weren't here to make arrests. They were here to wipe the slate clean. Clara peered over the bar. Through the haze of tear gas, she saw the desperation on O'Malley's face. He was checking his ammunition. He was running low. Think, Clara. Think. She knew this building. She had spent hours staring at the walls while cleaning up. She had explored the cellar when she was hiding from Eddie. The coal chute. "Declan!" she screamed, her voice cracking from the smoke. O'Malley couldn't hear her over the gunfire. She grabbed a heavy glass ashtray from the floor and hurled it at him. It struck his shoulder. He spun around, gun raised. "The coal chute!" she yelled, pointing toward the far wall of the kitchen, visible through the swinging doors. "In the pantry? It leads to the street." O'Malley's eyes widened. The old coal delivery chute. It had been boarded up years ago when they switched to oil heat, but the shaft was still there. "Bricks! The kitchen!" O'Malley bellowed. "Fall back! Cover fire!" The men unleashed a furious volley up the stairs, pinning the police down for a few precious seconds. "Go! Go! Go!" O'Malley sprinted toward the bar, grabbed Clara by the arm, and hauled her to her feet. "Show me!" They ran into the kitchen, bullets splintering the doorframe around them. The cooks had vanished, likely hiding in the freezer. Clara dragged O'Malley to the pantry at the back. It was dark, smelling of onions and potatoes. Behind a stack of flour sacks was a wooden panel nailed into the brickwork. "There!" Clara pointed. O'Malley didn't hesitate. He kicked the wood. It splintered. He kicked again, putting his boot through the rotten planks. He tore the rest away with his bare hands, revealing a dark, slanted metal tunnel leading upward. "It's tight," O'Malley panted, "but it's open." He turned to his men who were piling into the kitchen, firing backward through the doors. "Into the chute, one by one. Go." "What about Eddie?" Bricks asked, dragging the terrified manager by his collar. "Shove him up first," O'Malley said. "If there's a cop waiting at the top, Eddie catches the bullet." Bricks threw Eddie into the chute. "Climb, you rat!" Eddie scrambled up the metal slide, slipping and cursing. He reached the top, pushed open the metal grate on the sidewalk, and disappeared. No gunshot followed. "Clear!" Eddie's faint voice echoed down. "Go!" O'Malley ordered the others. One by one, the gunmen holstered their weapons and shimmied up the chute. The police were breaching the kitchen. The double doors swung open. "Freeze!" a voice shouted. O'Malley spun around, firing the last of his drum magazine into the ceiling, bringing down a shower of plaster and dust to create a screen. "Clara, now!" He lifted her up. She scrambled into the cold, soot-covered metal tunnel. She dug her heels in, clawing at the rust, pulling herself up toward the circle of gray daylight above. She popped out onto the sidewalk of the alley behind the club. It was raining. The air tasted sweet and clean compared to the gas below. Bricks pulled her out. "Get to the car!" O'Malley came flying out of the hole a second later, landing in a roll on the wet pavement. "Grenade!" he shouted, pulling the pin on a small fragmentation grenade he had taken from the weapons cache. He dropped it down the coal chute. Thump! "Run!" They sprinted down the alley. Kaboom! The ground shook beneath their feet. A plume of dust and smoke shot out of the coal chute like a geyser. The explosion collapsed the tunnel, sealing the police inside the basement. They reached the end of the alley where the getaway cars, 2 black Buicks and the Packard, were waiting. The drivers, who had been waiting for the signal, revved the engines. "Where to, boss?" Bricks yelled, shoving Clara into the back of the Packard. O'Malley jumped into the passenger seat, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, his suit covered in white dust. He looked back at the smoking ruin of the Gilded Lily, his kingdom, his sanctuary, gone. He turned forward, his eyes burning with a terrifying, cold resolve. "We have no home," O'Malley said, his voice flat. "We have no club. We have no money except what's in our pockets." He looked at the clock on the dashboard. 2:15 p.m. "The boat," O'Malley said. "We stick to the plan, but now, we don't just kill Vinny." He racked the slide of a fresh pistol. "We burn it all down." The cars peeled out of the alley, tires screeching on the wet pavement, disappearing into the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. Behind them, sirens wailed, converging on the burning speakeasy. But the tiger had already escaped the cage, and now it was hunting.
Ashes and alibis. The Chicago River was a vein of gray sludge pulsing through the heart of the city, swollen with rain and industrial runoff. It smelled of dead fish and diesel oil, a sharp contrast to the expensive perfume that still clung faintly to Clara's coat. It was 3:45 p.m. The escape from the alley had been a blur of screeching tires and narrow misses. They had ditched the conspicuous Packard and the bullet-riddled Buicks in a warehouse district garage, swapping them for two nondescript delivery trucks marked O'Shea's Plumbing. Now they stood on a rotting wooden dock near the mouth of the river, where the murky water met the vast, restless expanse of Lake Michigan. Bobbing in the water was their chariot, the Banshee. It was a 40-foot rum runner, a converted luxury yacht that had been stripped of its velvet cushions and mahogany trim to make room for crates of liquor and speed. It was painted a dull, matte gray to blend in with the lake mist. Its twin Liberty aircraft engines growled with a low, throaty idle that vibrated the planks of the dock. "Get on board," O'Malley ordered, his voice fighting the wind. He had discarded his ruined trench coat. He now wore a heavy fisherman's sweater he'd pulled from the back of the truck, sleeves rolled up, revealing the grime and dried blood on his arms. Clara stepped onto the swaying deck. The boat felt alive, restless. Bricks and the other men were loading weapons, crates of ammunition, Tommy guns, and a box marked "Dynamite, Danger." Eddie, the trader, sat huddled near the stern, his expensive suit ruined, his face a mask of misery. He wasn't tied up anymore. There was nowhere to run. The lake was behind him, and O'Malley was in front of him. "Cast off!" O'Malley shouted to the pilot, a silent, scar-faced man named Stitch. The engines roared. The Banshee pulled away from the dock, churning the water into white foam. They headed out into the open lake, the skyline of Chicago rising like a jagged fortress on their left. Clara stood by the railing, watching the city drift away. Somewhere back there in the tangled streets of the west side, the Gilded Lily was burning. Her sister was in a sanatorium waiting for money that might never come. Her old life, the dishes, the poverty, the smallness of it all, felt like a dream she had woken up from. "You should go below," O'Malley said, appearing beside her. "It's going to get rough." "I'm fine," Clara said. She didn't look at him. She looked at the gray horizon. "Where are we going, really? Navy Pier is huge. How do we find them?" "We don't have to search," O'Malley said, lighting a cigarette with cupped hands. "Vinny is a creature of habit. He'll be at the East End warehouse. It has the deepest draft for the big boats. He thinks he's there to ambush my trucks at midnight. He'll be setting up his sniper nests now, feeling like a genius." He took a drag, the smoke whipped away instantly by the wind. "He thinks I'm dead, Clara. Or in cuffs." Ruby told him the raid was coming. "He assumes the cops wiped us out. That's our alibi. Dead men don't come by boat." "And when we get there?" Clara asked. "What happens?" O'Malley looked at her. The wind messed his hair, making him look younger, wilder. "We burn it down. We take the shipment he's waiting for, if it's there, and we leave Vinny in the ashes. And then we disappear," he said. "The train ticket I gave you, it's still good." Clara touched her chest, feeling the brass key under her dress. "I told you, I don't like boring." O'Malley smiled, a grim, fleeting thing. "Let's survive the next hour first." Navy Pier, 4:30 p.m. The rain had intensified, turning the world into a wash of charcoal and slate. The pier stretched out into the lake, a massive finger of concrete and steel. At this hour, in this weather, the boardwalk was deserted. The carousel was still. The Ferris wheel stood like a skeletal giant against the clouds. But at the far end, near the massive brick warehouses, there was activity. The Banshee cut the engines, drifting silently on the current. They approached the pier from the south side, hugging the massive wooden pilings that supported the structure. "Quiet now," O'Malley whispered. "Sound carries over water." They glided under the pier. It was a cathedral of shadows. The wooden beams crisscrossed above them, dripping slime and water. The sound of the waves slapping against the pilings echoed eerily. It smelled of rot and rust. "Stitch, hold her steady," O'Malley signaled. He turned to his men. "We go up the service ladders. 2 teams. Bricks, take the left. I take the right. We come up on either side of the loading bay. They'll be watching the street side. We hit them from the water side." He checked his Thompson. "No prisoners. Vinnie Moretti ends today." The boat bumped gently against a barnacle-encrusted pylon. "Clara," O'Malley said, "stay in the cabin. Keep your head down. If we don't come back in 15 minutes, Stitch knows where to take you." "No," Clara said. She reached into her purse and pulled out the small pearl-handled Derringer she had taken from Ruby. It was a toy compared to the machine guns, but it was a weapon. "I'm not sitting in the dark waiting to hear if you're dead." O'Malley looked at the tiny gun, then at her eyes. He saw the same steel he had seen when she sang "Am I Blue?" "Stay behind me," he said. "And for God's sake, don't shoot me in the back." They began the climb. The iron ladders were cold and slick with algae. Clara climbed, the water churning blackly below her. Above, she could hear voices. Laughter. They reached the underside of the pier deck. There was a maintenance hatch. O'Malley pushed it up slowly. He peeked out, then dropped back down. 5 of them, he whispered, lounging on crates, playing cards. They aren't even watching the water. He signaled Bricks on the other ladder. 3, 2, 1. O'Malley threw the hatch open and vaulted onto the dock. "Fold 'em!" he roared. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. The silence of the pier was shattered. O'Malley's gun sprayed the group of men playing cards. 3 went down instantly, cards fluttering in the air like white confetti mixed with red mist. The other 2 scrambled for cover, fumbling for their weapons. Bricks's team popped up from the other side, shotguns booming. The crossfire was brutal and efficient. Clara climbed up onto the wet concrete. The air was instantly filled with the acrid smell of cordite. She ducked behind a stack of crates as a bullet whizzed past her ear. "Inside! Inside!" O'Malley shouted, advancing on the warehouse doors. The warehouse was a cavernous space, dimly lit by hanging bulbs. Crates were stacked high to the ceiling. At the far end of the warehouse, near the office, a group of men were scrambling. In the center of them, wearing a beige trench coat, was Vinnie Moretti. Vinnie looked confused, wild. He was shouting orders, pointing toward the doors. He had expected trucks from the street, not a phantom army from the lake. "O'Malley!" Vinnie screamed, recognizing the figure advancing through the smoke. "You're supposed to be dead." "I'm hard to kill, Vinnie," O'Malley yelled back, ducking behind a forklift as bullets sparked off the metal. "Ask your mother!" The warehouse erupted into a full-scale battle. Bullets chewed through wood crates. Bottles shattered, leaking whiskey onto the floor. "Flank him," O'Malley ordered. "Bricks, take the catwalk." Bricks ran for the stairs, firing his shotgun one-handed. Clara pressed herself against a crate marked machinery parts. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it would burst. She saw a movement to her left. One of Vinnie's men was creeping around the side, trying to get a bead on O'Malley. He raised a pistol. Clara didn't think. She raised the Derringer with 2 hands. She aimed. Crack! The kick was negligible, but the effect was immediate. The man yelped, dropping his gun and clutching his shoulder. O'Malley spun around, saw the man, saw Clara, and finished the job with a short burst. He looked at her and nodded, a grim acknowledgement of a debt paid. "Dynamite!" O'Malley shouted. "Flush them out of the office!" One of the men lit the fuse on a stick of dynamite and hurled it like a baseball pitcher. It sailed through the air, crashing through the glass window of the elevated office where Vinnie had retreated. Boom! The explosion blew the front of the office out. Wood, glass, and filing cabinets rained down onto the warehouse floor. Vinnie Moretti staggered out of the smoke, coughing, his face bloody. He held a pistol, waving it blindly. "It's mine!" Vinnie screamed, his voice cracking. "This city is mine!" O'Malley stood up from behind cover. The shooting stopped. The silence was sudden and ringing. Vinnie saw him. He raised his gun. "Goodbye, Declan." Click. Vinnie's gun was empty. He stared at it in horror. O'Malley didn't raise his Tommy gun. He let it hang by its strap. He reached into his belt and pulled out his own .45 pistol. He walked forward, stepping over the debris. "You broke the rules, Vinnie," O'Malley said, his voice calm, echoing in the vast space. "You brought cops into our business. You bought my people. You tried to kill a girl." Vinnie backed up until he hit the railing of the loading dock. Behind him was the drop to the dark water below. "Declan, wait!" Vinny stammered, holding up a shaking hand. "We can talk. Half the territory. I'll give you half." "I don't want half," O'Malley said. "I don't want any of it anymore." He raised the pistol. "Wait! The shipment!" Vinny cried, pointing to a stack of crates near the door. "It's worth 50 grand. Take it. Just let me walk." O'Malley looked at the crates. Then he looked at Clara, who was standing near the entrance, safe. "Ashes, Vinny," O'Malley said. "Just ashes." He fired. One shot. Clean. Center mass. Vinny Moretti looked surprised. He slumped back, tipped over the railing, and splashed into the water below. The ripples spread out, disappearing into the darkness of Lake Michigan. O'Malley stood there for a moment, lowering the gun. "Clear!" Bricks shouted from the catwalk. "Remaining hostiles surrendering." O'Malley holstered his gun. He turned to the crates Vinny had pointed out. He pried the lid off one. Inside, nestled in straw, were bottles of high-end scotch. "Bricks!" O'Malley called out. "Load these onto the boat, as much as we can carry. Burn the rest. Burn it, boss. You heard me. Pour kerosene on it and light a match. If we can't have it, nobody does. Let the cops explain a burning warehouse." The men moved quickly. They formed a bucket brigade, passing crates down to the Banshee. O'Malley walked over to Clara. He checked her for injuries. "You okay?" "I shot a man," Clara whispered, looking at her hands. They were shaking now. "You saved me," O'Malley said. He took her hands in his. "That's the alibi, Clara. Self-defense. In a war, there is no murder, only survival." He led her back to the ladder. "Come on, we're leaving." The lake, 6:12 p.m. The Banshee was heavy in the water now, loaded with whiskey and tired men. Behind them, a pillar of black smoke rose from the end of Navy Pier, blending with the storm clouds. They were miles out, safe in the open water. The city was just a strip of lights in the distance. O'Malley stood at the stern, watching the smoke. He poured 2 glasses of the stolen scotch. He handed one to Clara. "To the Gilded Lily," he said softly. "To the ashes," Clara replied. They clinked glasses. The whiskey was smooth, tasting of peat and smoke. "So?" O'Malley said, leaning against the rail. "We have the whiskey. We have the bonds in the bank. Vinny is gone. The cops think we burned in the club." "We're ghosts," Clara said. "Ghosts with deep pockets," O'Malley corrected. He looked at her. "St. Louis is still an option. I can drop you at a port down the coast. You can take the money. Rose will be fine." Clara looked at him. She thought about the adrenaline, the fear, the power she had felt holding the gun. She thought about the way O'Malley looked at her, not as a decoration, but as an equal. "And you?" she asked. "Where does the ghost go?" "New York," O'Malley said. "Or maybe Havana. Somewhere warm. Somewhere they don't know my face." He paused. "It's a long trip. It gets lonely." Clara took another sip of whiskey. She felt the brass key against her skin. She pulled it out, letting it dangle on the silver chain. "I've never been to Havana," she said. O'Malley smiled. It was a real smile this time, reaching his eyes, banishing the soldier's 1,000-yard stare for just a moment. "They have good music there," he said. "Rhythm. Soul." "Do they need singers?" Clara asked. "I suspect," O'Malley said, reaching out to cover her hand with his, "that they have never heard a voice like yours." He turned to the pilot. "Stitch, change course. We're heading north. We'll refuel in Wisconsin, then we make for the ocean." The boat banked, the engines roaring a deeper note. Clara Vance stood next to the king of the West Side, or the king of nothing, depending on who you asked. She watched Chicago disappear into the rain. She left behind her name, her debts, and her fear. The speakeasy was gone. The secret was out. But as the boat cut through the dark water toward a new horizon, Clara knew that the music hadn't stopped. It had just changed tempo. And for the first time in her life, she was the one leading the band.
The last train out. Union Station, Milwaukee. 3 days later, the steam from the locomotive hissed and curled around the platform like a living thing. White and blinding in the crisp November morning, it smelled of coal dust, grease, and the metallic tang of travel, the scent of goodbyes and new beginnings. Clara Vance stood near the rear car of the Empire Builder, her face hidden beneath the brim of a new, wide-brimmed hat. She wore a heavy wool coat, dark gray, indistinguishable from the attire of 100 other travelers. Beside her stood a man in a tweed suit and spectacles, looking more like a university professor than the former king of the Chicago underworld. Declan O'Malley adjusted his glasses, non-prescription, purely for camouflage, and checked his pocket watch. 5 minutes, he murmured. Then we're gone. Clara gripped the handle of her leather suitcase. It was new. Everything they owned was new. Their clothes, their luggage, even their names. To the conductor checking tickets, they were Mr. and Mrs. Elias Thorne, bound for New York City. "Did you mail the letter?" O'Malley asked, his voice low. Clara nodded. "This morning, registered post." Inside that envelope was the brass key to the safety deposit box in Chicago, along with a letter to the director of the Naperville Sanatorium. The instructions were clear. The bonds were to be used for the indefinite care of Rose Vance. If there was anything left over, it was for Rose's education when she was well enough to leave. "She's safe, Clara," O'Malley said, sensing her hesitation. "The money is untraceable. The doctors will ask no questions as long as the bills are paid. And Vinny's crew, they're scattered to the wind." He pulled a folded newspaper from under his arm and handed it to her. Clara took it. The headline of the Chicago Tribune screamed in bold black ink, "Gangland Inferno. The Gilded Lily, destroyed notorious mob boss and torch singer, feared dead in blaze. Rival gang leader, found, floating in harbor." Clara traced the headline with her gloved finger. "Feared dead," she whispered. "The police found bodies in the basement," O'Malley said grimly. "Burned beyond recognition. Probably Vinny's men from the initial assault, or maybe some poor souls who got caught in the crossfire. Miller needed a clean case to close, so he identified one of them as me and one as you. It wraps everything up with a bow." "So we really are ghosts," Clara said. "Better," O'Malley replied. "We're memories, and memories can't be prosecuted." The conductor blew his whistle. "All aboard! Empire Builder departing for Chicago, Cleveland, Buffalo, and New York City." O'Malley offered her his arm. "Shall we, Mrs. Thorne?" Clara looked back at the station one last time. She thought of the alleyway, the smell of the speakeasy, the blinding lights of the stage. She thought of the girl she was 3 days ago, desperate, frightened, washing dishes to keep the heat on. That girl was dead, buried in the ashes of the club. She took O'Malley's arm. "We shall." They stepped onto the train. The compartment was first class. A world of polished mahogany, plush velvet seats, and brass fixtures. It was a luxury Clara had only ever seen in magazines. As the train lurched forward, chugging slowly out of the station, neither of them spoke. They watched the industrial outskirts of Milwaukee slide by. Factories, smokestacks, rows of identical brick houses. O'Malley took off his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. The tension that had held his body rigid for 72 hours finally began to bleed away. He poured 2 glasses of water from the crystal carafe on the table. "No whiskey?" Clara asked with a faint smile. "I think I've had enough whiskey to last a lifetime," O'Malley said. "Besides, we're retired. We should cultivate respectable habits." "Retired," Clara tested the word. "It sounds boring." "Boring is safe," O'Malley countered. "Boring is waking up in the morning without checking the window for snipers. Boring is reading the paper without looking for your own obituary." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He placed it on the table between them. "Your share," he said, "from the sale of the boat and the cargo. Stitch got a cut. The boys took their share and headed west. This is yours. 25,000. Clara stared at the envelope. It was an astronomical sum. Enough to live on for a decade. Enough to buy a house, a car, a life. "I don't want it," she said. O'Malley froze. "Excuse me?" "I don't want to just take the money and split," Clara said, turning from the window to face him. You said you were going to Havana. You said they have rhythm there. I did. And you said it gets lonely. O'Malley studied her face. The train picked up speed, the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of the wheels becoming a steady heartbeat beneath them. Clara, he said softly, you have a chance here to walk away. You can go to New York, audition for Broadway. You have the talent. You don't need to be tethered to an ex-bootlegger with blood on his hands. I'm not tethered, Clara said. She reached across the table and took his hand. His knuckles were still bruised from the fight on the pier. I'm choosing. There's a difference. She looked at him with a clarity that cut through the haze of the past few days. You saved my life, Declan. And I saved yours. We danced in the middle of a war zone. Do you really think I can go back to singing love songs to strangers who don't know what it's like to really live? O'Malley turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. He looked at their joined hands, the scarred hand of a soldier and the delicate hand of an artist, bound together by gunpowder and secrets. Havana is hot, he warned, and they speak Spanish. I'm a quick study, Clara said, and I look good in summer clothes. O'Malley laughed. It was a sound of pure relief. That you do, Clara. That you do. He picked up the envelope of money and tucked it back into his pocket. All right then. We go to New York. We catch a steamer south. We buy a small place on the water. Maybe open a club. A legitimate one. With no back rooms? Clara raised an eyebrow. Maybe one back room. O'Malley winked. For high-stakes poker. Old habits. Die hard. The dining car later that night. The train was tearing through the darkness of Indiana. The dining car was aglow with soft lamps and the clink of silverware. Clara and Declan sat at a corner table. They had eaten a meal that tasted like victory, roast duck, potatoes, and a bottle of expensive red wine, legal or at least legal enough for the railroad. Clara looked out the window. All she could see was her own reflection in the glass, superimposed over the rushing night. She looked different. Her eyes were older, wiser. What are you thinking about? Declan asked. The future, Clara said. Do you think it will last? This peace. Declan took a sip of wine. He looked thoughtful. The world is changing, Clara. You can feel it. The war ended 6 years ago, but the world is still dizzy. The market is climbing to the moon. People are drinking like there's no tomorrow. Eventually, the bill comes due. He was right, of course. He didn't know about the stock market crash that would come in 1929, or the dark decade that would follow. He didn't know about the next war on the horizon. But, Declan continued, we have tonight, and we have tomorrow. And for people like us, that's more than we deserve. He raised his glass. To the last train out. Clara raised hers. And the first ship, south. They drank. Suddenly the train whistle blew, a long, mournful sound that echoed across the plains. It sounded like a jazz trumpet holding a blue note. Clara smiled. She began to hum, softly at first, then a little louder. Am I blue? Am I blue? Ain't these tears in my eyes tellin' you? A few tables away, a businessman looked up from his soup. A couple stopped whispering. They turned to listen. Clara's voice, even at a hum, had that magnetic pull. It was the voice of the speakeasy, the voice of the smoke, the voice of the secret. Declan watched her, mesmerized. He knew that wherever they went, Havana, Paris, or the end of the earth, he would follow that voice. The train rushed on into the night, carrying them away from the wreckage of their past, toward a future that was unwritten, dangerous, and absolutely perfectly free.